Hey everybody. Here we go. Thanks for tuning into this. I am going to do what I usually like to have done when someone says, "Hey, we're going to have an episode about something very specific," and then they wait like 30 fucking minutes to get to it. Here's what I'm going to do. We're just going to get right to it. Isn't that way better? Okay, so my guest, and please forgive me if I fuck this up because I've only used this interview feature once, but my guest today is a good friend of mine. His name is Charles Adams. He is, hold on, let's get him in here. There, can you guys see him? Can you see you?
I can see my beautiful face. Yes, sir.
Fuck yeah, I did it. So what we can do is also, um, there.
Oh, wow.
Now we're here talking to each other. I'm
Much
my
better.
own. What's that?
Much better.
That is much better. I'm my own producer on this show, so I do a lot of the producing live as I'm figuring it out. Because what better way to learn? Um, and for anyone, this is streaming on YouTube and Facebook and Twitch, so people sort of come in from different areas. And if you can't see and hear either of us, let me know in the comments because all the comments come filtered right to me. And any questions you have for Charles, also in the comments, and I can pop that shit right up on screen. Um, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. You got a nice green screen going. What do you normally put back there?
It's a green wall. This is in the studio with COVID. I'm on the evening news a few times a week, and then on a late night newscast a couple times a week.
Hmm.
And instead of a green screen, I just had them paint a wall green, much to my wife's chagrin.
Yeah.
But usually, I have either the local Fox affiliate,
Okay.
whatever their screen is, or there's a skyline. I don't know how to put it on this app. I am old. So I'm sure there's some way to do it, but you kids and your technologies and the interwebs and stuff, it's beyond me. So
Yeah, it's starting to happen to me too. There are certain
you're
things.
like 12. Shut up.
Well, not really, because there are other actual 12-year-olds who are like have mastered TikTok, and it makes me feel like I'm 180.
Well, it's
It's
native technology for them.
it is,
That's
yeah. They were
my
born.
kids kind of missed the cut of because we have them so young of growing up with a phone in their hand as a electronic pacifier. But for this next generation, and the people like to malign, I mean, they're all going to be brilliant probably,
Probably,
but
yeah.
they
So I mean, so are your kids anyway. One's a doctor, one's a lawyer, or almost on their way.
uh, right. Yeah, I mean, they have my genetics. I'm a fucking genius. So, but fortunately, they both look like my wife, which I think is a much better accomplishment
Best of
because,
both worlds there.
yeah, I look
Um,
like a 6'8" ogre.
you are very tall.
Mhm.
You make me feel short. That no, that doesn't usually happen. I'm 6'4", and I'm just like, whenever we
Well, you
talk.
make me feel whiter with your, in obscure ethnicity and handsome, good looks. If what's the bad guy in not Rocky and Bullwinkle, but the fucking the Mountie from the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, the guy that was always tying people like Dirk
Oh,
Dastardly or
with
something.
the yeah, yeah. I've been compared to that guy, and I didn't remember his name from when I was a kid, but I had a couple of people say so, and I'm like, who the fuck? So you Google it, and you're like, oh, it's one of those. You Google it at home alone, and you're like, hey, it's like too late to insult the person because they're gone.
It seems like you could make a lot of money in that porn game, right? Like real
Yeah,
life
do that.
cartoon. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you're killing it out here, but in New York, I'm just throwing some free advice out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So let's do a little bit of because right now we're just like we're catching up basically. So to those who aren't clear, we do know each other. We're actual friends in real
Right.
life. I didn't
Right.
just find a random, attorney with some credentials. I actually know Charles. He's a good man. Um,
I mean,
we
let's not go too far with the good man shit, but
He's a
yes, we do
decent
know each other
guy.
very well.
His wife is much cooler.
Very much, much cooler.
There you go. So we met many years ago out front at the Comedy Store,
Right.
and you and your wife huge fans of comedy, which immediately made me huge fans of both of you because
She's a huge fan of comedy. Let's not
I mean you
I
like
mean I
stand-up.
don't not enjoy comedy, but I listen to music. Like I do talk radio every day and I would rather shoot myself in the mouth than listen to talk radio. And
Yes.
she enjoys comedy and I enjoy her. So and there are some comedians like you that I enjoy, but then there's a lot of comedy that I find insipid, so it's kind of a balancing act for me. Whereas music, except for that one band Tool, which is,
You
only
son
for
of a
tools,
interview
um,
over.
I'm more of a consumer of that, which, but anyhow, comedy's good. The store's great. The store is really
Yes.
like, it's still shocking to me that you abandoned that to go to New York City. And I like New York City, but I think comedy is a lot more fun in Los Angeles. And I don't think there's a better place to do it than the store. And it is kind of a far more interactive environment with I mean, you've been sober, I think, since I've known you, but
Yeah.
I like to get drunk in front of the store. And I remember when
Right.
now SNL player Punky
Hmm.
would run down to Pink Dot and buy tall boys for me because I'm a tremendous tipper. Having grown up poor and made some money, I always tip a lot.
Yeah.
And she would run down and buy me tall boys when I drank all of the Paps or the PBR there at the store. What a great.
Yeah, she's
And the
great.
pandemic ruined it all, damn it.
I
But,
know. Yeah, I mean the store's a wonderful place. And I left for a few different reasons. One of which was, just wasn't getting enough work there anymore. So I
yeah.
had to kind of come to where the work was.
I figured you left to go be like, the intellectual living in Brooklyn in a weird hat and corduroy jeans and occasionally a vest with some interesting coffee and just
Yes.
looking morose. I don't know if that happened. You really
All of that's
disappointed
true
me.
except for the intellectual part. I'm a dumb person, but I can look smart, and
Yeah,
that's what
I
it's all
think
about.
this is false deprecation. I disagree. I was disappointed when I messaged you or tagged you in the sand coffee.
Oh
Right?
yeah.
It was like the fact that I found a way to prepare coffee that you haven't enjoyed really kind of, I hate to say it, it kind of lessened you to me because you were my coffee Sherpa. Is that
So
right, or is that some sort of cultural appropriation?
no, I think you
Um,
can. I think you
you could
can
say
use.
coffee Sherpa.
I think so.
Um,
Um,
I don't know,
you can. I
but
mean, look, any word or description, someone somewhere will call that appropriation. So I don't even keep track anymore. I'm just like, is it a appropriate way to do it that doesn't involve a slur? Then great. Um, but I don't think I'd ever seen that method in real life. I've only ever seen that video a few times, like on social
oh,
media.
yeah,
But
okay,
have
some
you?
social media bullshit, huh?
No, I'm sure it's real, but I mean, I just have never come across it. But what I'm saying is, if I had seen that in real life, I'd be like, give me a cup of that. I need to have that, and I would have done a video of me in it. It would have been very obnoxious.
It would
Did you
blow up.
try it somewhere? Or did you just see it online?
No, I just saw it online as well, and I was like, God damn, where do you do this? And I figured I'd immediately ask you. And
Yeah, I mean,
when you said you had, I think maybe you and I should seek out that coffee. There's got to be somewhere in New
yes,
York City, right? Like if there's one place in the United States that would have coffee brewed in sand,
yeah,
thus then
yeah.
strained, it would be New York City. But I didn't even get the straining process. Like they're pressing if you can strain the coffee into that cup, how do you get the coffee out without it going right back into the sand? And how fine of a strainer must it be to not let little silica of sand in with the coffee? I don't
Well,
know.
no, that is an actual a coffee pot is what they're using. So that method of coffee is like a it's very common in the Middle East. So you'll take that little pot with the
Right.
handle, and that you'd normally put on the stove top, and then you would pour
Oh, okay.
coffee grounds and the water in, and it would be like an immersive brewing kind of thing.
So it was hot sand. Is that what it was?
I
Or
guess yeah. The only difference with their method, I think they just put the coffee and the water in, and then put it in hot sand and moved it around. And that sand
see,
must have been super hot for it to just start boiling it.
See, that's what when it looked like they were pressing it into the sand and the coffee was bubbling up through the sand. I didn't understand, but I'm slow. And I know this is not at all what you intended to talk about
Not
on
at
this
all.
show. So I hate it. And you did. I heard you promise to jump right into it.
Right.
So I feel like I've made a liar out of you, which which
Well,
brings you
only
into the Brotherhood of Lawyers, so that works out.
there you go.
Uh,
Very good segue. See, this is a professional at work here, everybody. He is on the nightly news. Not nightly though. Is it once a week?
On the evening news, it's some between 2 and 4 times a week
Okay.
for a Fox affiliate, which people always hear Fox and they think Fox News. And local Fox stations have nothing to do with Fox News other than they're owned by the same oligarch, right?
Mhm.
It feeds into something called Fox Soul, which is absolutely as tacky as it sounds. It is
Yes.
Fox for Black people,
Okay.
but it's Houston, so it's an urban station and has an urban feel. And I do a segment called Making the Case, where I talk about legal issues, and then I'm a legal analyst on a show called The Isaiah Factor. And everyone who watches viral videos from Isaiah Carey was the black reporter in Arkansas when he was much younger. They got a bug in his mouth, and it was one of the first viral videos.
Oh, that's him?
That's
Never
Isaiah.
put that together.
Yeah, he was much younger
Right.
then, but it led to a lot of fame for him. He went from that to Memphis to here,
Yes.
and he actually has an hour-long news show at 10:30 that every day does probably double what Fallon and Colbert and Kimmel
Wow.
do. He kills them. I'm keeping
Yeah.
waiting for him to go national, and I want to be like his Ed McMahon or something.
Yes, that'd be great. Um, that's really cool. So
Yeah.
you guys are both Houston based, right? He lives there, or does he do?
Yeah. And so he's here, and
Okay.
he started off as a desk guy here for the news, and then I've got an evening radio show on one of the iHeart. So iHeart it's Houston, so of course you have a conservative talk station. You have two, that speaks to Houston, and I'm the one non-conservative voice, so I'm on from 8 to 10, and it's kind of a rejoinder because I'm not particularly progressive either. I'm kind of in the middle, which means everyone hates me, and I get death
Yes.
threats from both parties.
Sure.
But so I do that every night for me. Would I call myself a professional? No, because I have other jobs that I have to work during the day to make money, and I won't consider myself a professional, despite being the highest rated show on my station, until I make a living at this, right? But you're discouraging me, saying that you had to flee LA to New York because you weren't making the living, and you're an incredibly talented comedian. So you've just made me sad. So thanks for making me sad.
Well, look,
Appreciate it.
you don't think you could be a professional at it until you're making a full living from it, or just like because I mean you have like 3 or 4 different jobs, so you were
I
like
have 5 jobs,
right. So yeah,
but
I thought I was
yeah,
exaggerating by one,
right.
like you just probably
No,
two.
yeah, I. I think once my kids, I mean, you say doctor and lawyer, so the oldest is in California in medical school, but she's a fourth year, right?
Hmm.
I think she will try to devise a way when she's in her surgical residency next year for me to still pay for shit, and I probably will. John is a first year law student here in Texas, and I think he'll be off the payroll sooner. But yes, obviously it'd be easier to do it. And the pandemic, I had that. I saw you when I was up there. I had that one meeting with Universal trying to get me my Judge Judy show. One,
Yeah.
I think I'm probably too white, male, penist, cisgendered to.
Okay.
Really not, and rightfully so, because I guess we've dominated TV for the last 100 years, and maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so I had that meeting, but I thought I was going somewhere, and the pandemic kind of killed that. And so I don't know if I could ever make a living just talking into a microphone. That'd be great. But until then, I mean, I made $250,000 yesterday on a company that I just started 3 years ago.
Yesterday
And
alone, you made a quarter
yeah,
of a million.
it was fucking beautiful. It's a company that my wife is kind of running, and she keeps saying she's the breadwinner, and I refer to myself as the Steve Jobs. Like, I came up with this fucking idea.
Right. Yeah. I
I don't
put it
have to
all
work.
together.
I'm the idea person, but
A
that's not really true at
quarter of
all.
$1 million in one day?
I find out we're going to make another 300 grand next month. It's
What
great.
the fuck? What company is this?
We do financial advisor recruiting. As a lawyer, I'm a kind of an entrepreneur, and I've started, if you start business, it fails. But I had a judge's dog. I had a judge while I was in court. I've kind of got a unique practice in that I have a standalone criminal defense firm where I have a couple of former prosecutors that work for me. And then I am a partner in a civil firm based in East Texas in Beaumont, although I'm based in Houston. And this judge in a criminal court asked me, because Houston has courts of specific jurisdiction. We have criminal courts, civil courts, family courts, probate courts. Asked me to come talk to her in chambers, and I thought I was going to get yelled at, right, for being me, rude
Yes.
to somebody. And she came and she said, "Hey, her now, it was the time her daughter's boyfriend, but her son-in-law now, listened to me on the radio, and she wanted to talk to me about a possible employment case for her daughter." And I don't do a whole lot of employment law, but it's a judge who I have a bunch of cases in front of. So I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'll do it. Fuck, even if it costs me time and money, you'd hope they'll see some kind of karmic benefit to my clients.
Yes.
And it dealt with a firm that did financial advisor recruiting. I didn't know what the fuck that was, right?
Yeah.
And basically, you just call advisors, you cold call financial advisors. There's a lot more to it. There's data, and it's expensive to buy, and there's a science to it. But you get them to agree to meetings, and if they move, then you get a percentage of their trailing 12. So, like yesterday, we moved a Newport Beach, California team that was a lifer at the firm they went. They had 4 billion or 2 billion. Might have been 4 billion. It was 2 billion assets under management, like the 10th biggest advisor in California. And we moved him to a firm we represent. So what we do is we get a percentage of his trailing 12. So a percentage of the fees he made for both himself and his firm in the last 12 months. And it seems obscene and disgusting, right? But when I was going through the whole process of representing this young girl, our young woman, I said, well, fuck, why don't we start a competing firm? And she was kind of burnt out by it. But about 8 months later, her boyfriend did. And we started it maybe 3 years ago. And, we'll gross over $1 million this year.
Wow.
And it's really cool because my wife, who, when I was a young police officer, my wife was a social worker. And then obviously she took off for a long time to raise our children. And it's something she's it's interesting. It's interesting. We just had, it's how much money these motherfuckers make, these financial firms. We just had a firm that we do some work for, but not our focus, that would like us to be their focus, who just offered to fly us out to California to take us to play at Torrey Pines. Like, I'm not a douchebag, I don't play golf. And to race speedboats. And that sounds fun to me, right? And
a second one,
but
yeah.
It's just crazy. Like, we've had other ones fly us out places, and like, so we got off. We're in San Diego, and me and Andrew at the airport, and there's these two guys with the little placards,
Yeah.
There was two, and I was like, we're going to the same fucking resort. And I said, well, it's nice that y'all picked us up there. And I'm like, no, we're your car for the week. We're just with you all week.
Wow.
And it's like, well, I don't need a car all week. But yeah, the financial industry, there's a reason. Like, I was in one office in Manhattan, and they had a Samo, a Basquiat, just in a little room, like a big giant $80 million fucking painting, not even in a lobby. And I was
like
like,
a janitor's closet or something.
yeah, it's like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, we're working for some wonderful firms, and I mean, those guys make money for the rich people, and they make them richer. And I'm just trying to, be able to pay for all my kids' education. I added up on like 800 grand into my kids' education at this point. It's fucking crazy. And you wonder how people do it. I mean, it's fucking nuts.
Yeah,
it's America.
I mean, you've been like this, your whole life. You just went from so a little bit of background on your work in like the legal fields. You started as a police officer in Austin, correct?
No, in South Houston. I didn't start it. Like, my first job was in 1990. I worked for the United States Census Bureau. I was finishing high school. I took a civil service exam, got a perfect score, was a supervisor, which is just absurd. That's the absurdity of some civil service process, the highest score. And I had a grass cut business, and I worked at Sonic, but that was my first kind of real job. And then I went to school, but I worked through school. Like, I was at LSU for a couple of years, just blind drunk, but I delivered pizza. I worked at Radio Shack. I became a barback and a bartender, and then a bouncer, and then all this. But at 21, I took a civil service exam with a buddy who's now the head of the SWAT team for the Harris County Sheriff's Department, because he was afraid he was going to fail. He said, "Hey, take this test with me." I took this test with him. I got a perfect score.
Copy of your.
Yeah, and no, he just what he figured I'd take it, then I could help him study and whatever.
Got it.
Well, I
Okay.
got a perfect score, and I was going to college. I'd transfer from LSU to U of H, but the plan was just to transfer for a little while because I was a fucking raging alcoholic, and I'd really become my worst possible person at LSU.
Hmm.
Living in a fraternity house, blind, drunk all the time, and you know, I mean, I got a perfect score. I took a job, and. So I went to, I finished undergrad as a police officer, and I have 2 law degrees. I got my first law degree working night shift patrol. And then I got a weird law degree called a master's of law there at Harvard.
Why is that a
And
weird one?
it's a lot of, most lawyers don't get it. I like the one at Harvard is made for law teaching, and I did really well in law school. Like I
Uh-huh.
never took school seriously, right? And I've just always been really good at it. And it really wasn't until Madeline was born that I was like, well, fuck, I don't want my kid not to have shit.
Yeah.
I didn't want my kid working their way through law school or through school like I did. So, when Mal was born, I got serious about shit. But I had a lot of my professors that said, "Hey, you should apply for this program at Harvard because you'd make a great law school professor," which I never did because I wanted to make money. But I did apply to the program, not expecting to get in because they only take 4 or 5 people a year,
Yeah.
and ended up at Harvard. And that was a fascinating experience, right? It was amazing to see how easy Harvard was. Harvard's more about getting in, right? Whereas state schools that are easy to get into, they're fucking hard, right? They're trying to weed people out.
Right.
Whereas Harvard, it's just this circle jerk of, oh, aren't we all so smart?
Yeah.
You know, but it's crazy. You put that on your wall. There were law firms that were not interested in me as a young police officer at the top of his class. They're, oh, you're going to go be a DA. And I go get the stupid degree at Harvard. Every fucking law firm except one in Texas, every big firm offered me a job. And it was just. But then I
Yeah.
quickly learned that that was fucking miserable, right? Like working in a big firm. Took a job in Dallas because my wife didn't want to move back to Houston at the time.
Uh-huh.
It was fucking awful. It was as awful as you can do at the time. It was the highest paying law firm in the country. And all we did was just dig through documents called document production and write memos. And I was just, and it was a whole lot of money, right? And
Yeah.
when I first took the job, I thought, well, fuck, you could hit me with a stick for this kind of money, right?
Yeah.
And fuck, I don't care. But then you quickly learn that you're miserable. So then I left and started my own practice, and I
So
made
when you
good
go
money.
to law school, do you pick like a specialty? Did you have like a focus that you were like, this is the kind of law I want to practice? Can you really like narrow it down, or how does it work?
It just kind of happens through the process, right? But for me, it was just, well, I just wanted a better job. Like,
Hmm.
so I went to law school. Worked at an appellate court as a briefing attorney, a clerk that writes opinions for a judge. And that all leads to a fancy law job. And I had a fancy law job for a little while, and I ended up in the commercial litigation section of this firm. But you don't get, as a young associate, you don't get a lot of exposure. And they kind of like the whole ex-cop Harvard thing. So like the partners would want to hang. And I just found it all, especially in Dallas, where Dallas is very, very plastic, right? And it's a different kind of plastic than LA, but it's still very plastic.
Yeah.
And I just didn't enjoy it. And as a kid, I used to watch Perry Mason with my grandmother all the time, and I knew that I wanted to be a criminal defense attorney, like my whole life. In fact, I became a policeman because I thought, well, that would probably make me a better criminal defense attorney. I was
Okay.
always, like at Harvard, I did my thesis long before it was cool, a couple of decades ago, on why we need to completely end the war on drugs. Right? I think there are some things like fentanyl and methamphetamine that need to continue to be legal, and the transport needs to be policed, or the trafficking needs to be policed. But like coke, amphetamine, opioids, they're all damaging. They can all destroy people's lives. But this conundrum is, we don't want you to use drugs because they're going to destroy your life. If we catch you using drugs, we're going to fucking destroy your life. So I've just
Right.
always, my position, even as a policeman, and I would just throw drugs away. I only got in trouble once. It was like 3.5 pounds. I was like throwing it down this gutter, and
Wow.
fucking snitch. Harold Kincaid went and told, and I got in trouble for not, filing it. But
See, there are cool cops out there, everybody, and their names are Charles Adams.
well, I haven't been a cop in 2 decades,
I
but
know,
I mean,
yeah.
there's always, I mean, that's well, this whole okay, the whole abolish the police narrative is naive nonsense, right?
Okay.
And abolish prisons. There are fucking monsters out there. There are
Yeah.
awful child raping, and then like even in like Austin, Texas, which has become a hotbed for comedians, and that's where I grew up. They have largely defunded the Austin Police Department led to cuts in the DWI task force, which, like, I'm a drinker. You know this. I like to
Yes.
fucking drink.
Yeah.
I won't drive a block, right? And
Right.
I won't, it won't drive anywhere. You know, and it's, you know, in Austin, it's a real problem. In Houston's actually the worst. Austin has all kind of issues with sexual assault, and when they defunded the police, it cut way into the forensics budget. And so there's, you know, there's people like, and I'll get invited to talk at schools about stuff, and you know, it seems like this. It's just a pitch for support for whatever competing local entity that is, you know, advocating for whatever perspective. Whereas me, it's just like, hey, we need to fix policing. We need policing, but it's also the paradigm is broken. Prohibition doesn't work. Morality policing doesn't work.
Right.
The focus of almost all law enforcement is prohibition, which leads to asset forfeiture, and citation revenue, which is just a taxation of the poor. Like, I used to be the presiding judge for a city, right? So it's almost all citation cases, right? And it's also the largest docket. Any municipal docket, it's going to be whatever locality's biggest docket. But I was very clear with my mayor who supported me that, hey, I'm not here to fucking make money for the city, because you know cities, that's how they balance their budget. And I would just dismiss cases left and right.
Yeah.
And that's wrong. Policing shouldn't be tax agents or revenuers, and they shouldn't be prohibition agents. The only thing policing should do in America is should investigate victim crime. And I'm not talking just violent crime, I'm talking about thefts and everything.
Yeah.
And they don't do that at all anymore. And I mean, they do it a little bit. And if there's a notorious case, they do. But for the most part, law enforcement comes out and tries to convince people not to file charges to suppress crime stats. And it's fucking horrifying. But the response to that is not to do away with police, it is to fix police. But no one wants to talk about fixing police. It's either thin blue line, where, you know, cops over everyone nonsense on one side, or
Right. Yeah.
abolish the police
But
nonsense.
don't a lot of people mean, like, by like abolish the police is like, you know, get rid of all the additional things that they're doing that aren't what you just described, like the focus on
Well,
violent
that's
crime.
what they say when pressed, but then you have, it's great, like the Portland City Councilwoman that wanted to completely do away with the police, but then she called the police when their Uber driver was telling her to get out of the car. I mean,
Right.
people, when you, if you don't mean abolish, the word shouldn't be abolish, right? And there's this ACAB, you know, all cops are bastards, right? And
Yes.
you know, I always thought Little Wayne had a great take on it. He had a cop save his life when he was 6 years old. And it's like, no, fuck that, man. You know, and there are a lot of, and see, crime is almost all racially and socioeconomically homogenous. People don't have honest conversations about crime.
Yeah.
And people that live in impoverished areas, people that live in communities of color, law-abiding citizens are often you know, they're the ones being impacted in high crime areas, no matter, you know, what race. And you know, we don't have these honest conversations about crime because, like, let's say the FBI crime data that came out this week on murder, we had this unprecedented 30% increase in America. It's horrifying.
Yeah.
And if you look at the actual data, the truth is African American men commit not just an outsized proportion of murder, but the majority of murder in America. So what a racist does is, see, black people, blah, blah, blah. But that's fucking bullshit, right?
Right.
Because what you have to look at is what's the real driver of violent crime. It has nothing to do with skin color, nothing at all, right? It has solely to do with poverty. And I think you see greater rates of it with the economic legacy of Jim Crow and the economic legacy of slavery and broken homes that are clearly a legacy to all of that as well. And no one wants to really fix this shit. No one will say, hey, how do we make this the young black man's life experience better so we don't see this disproportionate amount of violent crime in that community?
So it's
Because it
just
has nothing to do with them. But there's no talking about it. Like, everyone wants to just say ACAB or thin blue line, and they're both bullshit,
so
right?
it's
Because there's plenty of,
basically like just it's racism but just in a different way. Is
now, people
like
use data to try to support racist ideals, or people completely ignore data and ignore trying to get solutions.
but no, I guess
And
my question is
yeah.
is it if if the poverty that's contributing to this is, you know, basically has been handed down from, like, you know, Jim Crow era laws and all these sorts of things, like, would that suggest like a racist system
Oh no,
has
you clearly Right. No, I mean, it's not just a racist. Like I didn't grow up with money,
Yeah, yeah.
and people. Oh, there's also this desire to paint this portrait of privilege, meaning financial privilege, which that's not necessarily the case, right? There's opportunity privilege, and things are very different too. And people like we're getting to the point where we're on some issues, not nearly all issues, but some issues like admission. If you have two kids that both grew up very very poor, let's say Kentucky poor white person and Detroit poor person of color.
Okay.
Um, and they both apply to Harvard, right? And both had these horrifying life experiences. Well, the admission criterion for the white kid from Kentucky is going to be far, far harder than the kid from Detroit. And the same thing with the Asians, huge immigrant community, people of Middle Eastern descent. You're actually being discriminated against in the elite schools because they're trying to, and people don't want to talk about that kind of discrimination either. And that just kind of exacerbates other people's excuse for I mean, we're just in this like wheel of hate in America right now on social media, in the media spaces
Yes, yes,
portrayed.
yes.
And I don't think that that's real America, right? But we're also not talking about real fucking solutions, right? Like now our government is trying to tell us, well, other people have to get pushed to the back to allow more people to be put at the front. And we're going to do that on demographics instead of just trying to create a space where there's more opportunity for everyone that wants to work hard. And that's the America we need to get to. Like meritocracy has become a bad word. And so, well, you haven't earned it. You're just privileged. And it's telling people, there's kids today that don't have anything to do with anything, that they should accept some sort of discriminatory impact because something that people that were older than me did, right? Or people in my generation or people in your generation. Because I'm a good 10 years. What are you? You're mid 30s? How
I'm
old are you?
39 now.
Okay. I'm 10 years older, right? And what we've seen throughout history is this waning of bias in certain areas, but now we have this new scenario where people are trying to justify bias, and there's no longer an attempt to try to get post-racial in America. There's an attempt to find new excuses for new kind of separate but equal, but that separate but equal. It's fucking crazy, right? And like nobody wants to really talk about how we should fix shit because also being upset is big business. I mean, you look at comedians, right? For there's some. This is so I'm not this huge comedy. There's a lot like on Netflix. You have a lot of lectures masquerading as comedy, right? And
Yeah.
you see that a lot of comedians, the more successful they get, the more lectury they get, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And there is a group of people that buy into that. Although I think that's harder to break into than the pandering to racists and nutbag comedy. Because really, like on this podcast of yours, you probably need 15,000 people to watch it every time you do it to be successful at it, right?
Right, yeah.
To make a whole lot of money. Have a Patreon. If you get 15,000 people subscribing to that, you're fucking done. Okay, you're good, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything else. And people have figured out, shock jock comedians, a lot of not very successful ones have figured out that it's just like in talk radio, right? Like for me, because I don't have to make money in talk radio, I don't pander to anyone. I just try to piss everyone off. I just don't give a fuck, right? It's more
Yeah.
of a narcissistic, masturbatorial endeavor for me every day, 2 hours into a microphone, just saying everyone's an idiot, right?
Yes.
But there are most people doing it. They're trying to make a living at it,
Yep.
right? And you make a living at it by getting this core group of audience incited and angry and fired up. And for podcasting like this, well, if you say the fucking pandemic is a fucking hoax, if you pander to the Alex Jones nonsense, like
Yes.
people are trying to normalize Alex Jones nowadays. A lot of comedians are, right?
Yeah.
And they seem to have forgotten that fat, sorry fucking piece of shit told everyone that these children weren't really murdered and their parents were fucking crisis actors. And
Right.
how the fuck can you ever normalize the kind of cunt that would fucking say that parents grieving the mass murder of their fucking kids are fucking crisis actors, right? And
Yeah.
that's the whole thing. But there's a lot of comedians. I mean, you have a festival going on. We have a festival going on here in Houston, and I know a bunch of very, very progressive, very liberal, very woke. In fact, one of them is a writer for The Daily Show, lives there in New York, and he's doing this comedy thing that's about to happen in Austin,
Uh-huh.
and it's run by a bunch of fucking people that pander to fucking fucking racist, and it's good
Really?
business for comedy. Oh yeah, well I mean they're fucking New York, they're probably fucking friends of yours. But there's this just fucking they figured out that racist consumers of podcasts, racist consumers of radio, they're rabid. They love it. They want their echo chamber and their
Yeah.
biases confirmed. So if you speak to those people, it's a much easier way to make a very good living, right? If you and it's not hard to lie to them, especially in the pandemic has exacerbated all of it, right? And I've
Right.
been through from the beginning of the pandemic. I'm like, and because people have forgotten at the beginning of the pandemic, it was this Arkansas arch conservative, also Harvard Law School graduate, Senator Tom Cotton, who
Yeah.
was like, "Hey, y'all, this is fucking serious. We need to pay attention." And it was Nancy Pelosi and Schumer that were, and the New York Times, and they were pointing the finger and calling him a xenophobe, and they were going to Chinatown and hugging fucking people and shit.
Right.
And
Right.
and that was at the beginning. And then the pendulum shifted, right, to where it was this group of conservatives, liberty minded people, and that's the polite way of saying it, that then started this whole it's all a fucking hoax, right?
Yeah.
And from the very beginning, and fortunately I have the radio shows to back up. I was like, this is fucking serious. This was created in a fucking lab, most certainly probably accidentally released. It turns out that it wasn't accidentally released. It turns out that most likely, having seen some applications to NIH that were denied by the funding, that the lab wanted to intentionally release it into the bat population just to see how it would, not realizing it would become a global pandemic, right? But because the government and with social media and media's assist lied very early to the American people, these fringe conservatives have used those lies, right, to build a firmament for this lie that it's all a hoax. And it's not a fucking hoax. And people who don't understand, oh, it's just as sick as the flu. No, it's at the very least about 20 times more deadly than the flu, right? But
I mean, don't you think that that is sort of starting to die off, like this it's just the flu type thing with the amount of data that's coming out with not only in
no, because
terms of
I hear it every day. Like yesterday, my secretary's got 3 crazy messages from the some same guy that called the office, and I was going to post them yesterday. I forgot. Screaming and yelling about crazy shit. Now I mean, when people haven't touched their lives, like the hoaxers, it's just the flu. And I just stopped being friends with a guy who just couldn't take the fact that I mean, just wouldn't accept his bullshit. He's kind of a famous guy. And, I just got kind of tired of his constant social media attacks. And,
uh
you know, and you also have the people like the comedians I'm talking about, and you see it in talk radio, people that I know personally that are vaccinated, right? And then they turn on their microphone and they fucking talk like they're a crazy anti-vaxxer, but that they don't let anyone in their studio, they don't let anyone touch their fucking microphone because they're all fucking terrified, right? And
yeah.
and that's the problem. And for the consumers, they believe it, right? Like I have people that believe. I have people that miss like. So I got this new board op that's kind of a fucking idiot this week. It's crazy. iHeart hired this guy who like a year ago randomly attacked me on Twitter, and they didn't realize,
And now
right?
he works for
And
you.
yeah, now he's my fucking board op. And the guy that was training him, I said, "Hey, is that fucking fuck?" And he's like, "Yeah, it is." And so he fucked up my show last night because I still broadcast from the house and I don't use a brick. So I'm broadcasting like 10 minutes before it goes up for
Yeah.
each segment. But he didn't upload the first 2 segments. And my shows are kind of thematic, right?
Okay.
And so people who listen to the podcast, it airs on the radio every night. And then the people that listen to the podcast, well, they like listen. They're religious about it, and
Yeah.
it's so he played the first 2 segments from Monday in today. And so people are like, it's the same podcast. Why did it go up? Because if I skip a show, they don't podcast it. So then I had to find out that he just fucked up and he didn't load the first 2 segments. And it was just this thing. But what are you going to do? But that's the thing. People, like for me, it's been a slow, steady build. And the ratings are good. Probably I'm usually in the top 4 of iHeart's AM/FM podcast content for Houston, but I'm
Mhm.
not trying to blow up, right? Like I just don't care. I just want to, I'm glad that I have the listeners I have.
Yeah.
I'll have people. I was walking into Elton John with my son one day, and a guy ran over to. This was on his last tour to introduce his dad to me. He said, "This is the guy I listen to on the radio every day." And course, my son was just fucking mortified, you know. But
Yeah.
you know, it's just more fun for me. But for if you're really trying to build like you, Nick, if you want to build an audience, just start acting like the pandemic's not real and the
That's yeah. I mean,
vaccine isn't an actual vaccine, and people will drink that like fucking Kool-Aid. Like you have to pick a radical position, right? And there's a lot of comedians who have discovered
yeah.
they seem like intelligent people that if they can get you to that rabid audience, so they're willing to lie to them, right? And
Yes.
I think America generally, we've just got a lot of people that are willing to fucking lie. And it's the same thing in my criminal practice. You know, I cost myself business every day. Well, can you guarantee? No, I can't guarantee you. And I'm sure there are plenty of lawyers that will, and they're fucking lying to you. And I'm not willing to lie to you because I have money and I don't need to do it. And I think it helps me get better clients and it helps to give me better listeners. But Nick, if you
Yeah.
really want to get those numbers up,
I
I
mean,
tell you,
I'd
tell these
rather.
motherfuckers what they
No,
want to hear.
look. I believe it, and it's always sort of, been that way. Especially like, I mean, one of the oldest sort of, tricks in advertising was the whole, sex. Now that we got your attention thing, it's like if you want people to snap their heads around, like say something crazy, and then they go, huh? And then they're either listening because they love it or hate it, or a combination of the two, like with Howard Stern back in the day
Right.
before this sort of thing was just commonplace. Like people used to listen to him because they loved them, and then even more people listened to them or him because they didn't like him, and it was like you couldn't ask for more in terms of ratings, but like
Well, I think that what got people initially, and like rage listeners are great. I get plenty of those. Like
yeah.
the fucking week of the election, it was fucking. You know, Kathy's all worried, and I'm like, motherfuckers, meet me in a parking lot. I'll fucking kill all y'all bitches. And
Yeah.
Kathy's like, no, don't. But I honestly, I have a kind of different take on Howard. I think Howard attracted people that way, right? Like the shooting the ping pongs out of the girls' pussies and stuff.
Yes.
And, you know, but I think at the end of the day, it was his kind of self-deprecating
Yeah,
humanity
yeah.
that kept people there, right? But I don't think shows are getting past or podcasts are getting to the humanity, right? And I don't, again, I like music. I don't listen to other talk radio. I don't really
Yes.
listen to
Well,
podcasts.
that's the thing with Stern is
But
that he found a way to do it like in a, he was a genuine person, but
right,
as you start taking a formula that works and you just sort of just basically Xerox it over and over and over, it sort of just starts to fade and become a shittier version of what it was. And there are, countless radio shows and podcasts and that sort of thing that do that
crazy.
stuff. And like, ultimately good for them, bad for them, whatever. That's what they do. I don't really care. Like the entire objective behind this specific episode was I don't know. And I think it's more important to lead with that. It's always been more important to lead with that if you actually
Right.
want to like learn and educate yourself. It's like, be humble about your ignorance and like say, I don't fucking know what I'm talking about. And, a lot of people like to say like, I'm doing my research, and it's a lot of echo chamber bullshit, and they're getting involved in chat rooms and just kind of hearing what they want to hear.
Right.
I will I try to at least do the opposite and like engage with someone who I know I don't, you know, uh, listen to normally or believe in or read something, whether it's a website or a book about something where I go, well, what is this all about? And just sort of come out the other end going, maybe I wasn't entirely right about something, or like I still mostly believe, but hey, I learned a couple things along the way. And I think most of life has like a gray area to it, especially I think everything we've talked about up until now, there are, in terms of the like subject matter with like war on drugs and racist institutions and all that sort of stuff, like there are things you said where I'm like, yeah, I don't even know enough to argue against it. And I know
See, I
you.
disagree, Nick. If you know, I don't know if it's appropriate to say it, but I think I mean, you had sex with Tawny Katane, right? Which makes you an expert on everything, right? And you would talk about when I heard that story. I mean, I graduated high school in 1990, and when I heard that story, I said, Nick, Youssef, you are an expert on everything now. Now, if I found out you actually had sex with her on a Jaguar with heavy metal music, why it
Listen,
didn't even have to be White Snake. We don't
I
have to
will
be
not
too
I
specific.
I will not
Then,
speak. I will not speak of the
and I'm
dead.
not
She
you
has
didn't even, and
she
in the
has
credit,
passed on.
you didn't tell me the story. I heard it in the sphere
I know
of
you heard it on a fucking podcast somewhere.
Nick slept with Tawny Katane, and I still remember like no, not
I
Fucking
will not
white
speak.
steak. So
I will not speak of the
you're an
devil.
expert on everything. Don't be self-deprecating. You are an
No,
expert on everything.
I
You
like
just
to
have to
think
flop your Lebanese, right? Am I
yes,
wrong?
yes.
Yes, Lebanese penis out and say, "This has been inside Tawny Contain on the hood of a Jaguar. I don't know if the
Right.
last is real. I'm gonna always believe that it's real." And
Right
then
now
you're an
you're
expert on everything.
right now you're letting out the side of yourself that you can't do on local
Oh no,
Fox
yeah, I can't
affiliate
curse. I
television.
can't
So
do
you're
any
like,
of it.
"Ooh, here's the thing I would have loved to have said." You know, someone brings
Yeah.
up something on TV, you're like,
But that was
"Let me say that to
Howard
the
Stern
podcast."
said that shit and was willing to get fired for that
Yeah.
shit. Another thing that Howard does differently than a lot of you learn that radio is a patent place of insecurities and all this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But Howard also famously looked out for his team. And if
Yeah.
you get more into podcasting and radio, the space, the whole media space, there's not a lot of people like that. Like I don't enjoy a show. My wife has listened for years. She doesn't listen anymore, but she enjoyed it. I've never enjoyed it. He got on my nerves,
Hmm.
but he's a fucking loyalist, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot to be said because that's what we don't have much of in America anymore. People that are loyal to their team. And he was willing to do fucking different shit, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah,
He
when I
was.
when
I
I
mean,
moved from 10 to 12 to 8 to 10, I had to stop saying like bastard and bitch.
oh
Kind of
wow.
broke me up. So
That's
I can't
funny.
say anything anymore.
But yeah, I mean, look, ultimately, I think that like there are, if you head towards either end of the polls, you're gonna get extremists that go, finally, someone's speaking my language, and then they're gonna become obsessed with you and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And there are people that do that, and great. I just have no interest in that because if I have to live with myself day to
Right.
day, and by that I mean like checking my own social media and uploading these podcasts, I don't want to read those comments. Like there are people that are like, fine, I'll pretend to be this character, but then it's like, you want to engage with these fucking psychopaths all the time? Like, no thank you. I'd rather do something that will get me to learn, and then talk with people that so we can just sort of exchange ideas, and like that's the kind of thing that will get me through the day. And like, and if it doesn't become a fucking million downloads an episode, or 5 or 10 million or
See,
50,000,
that's another lie.
cool.
Like a lot of podcasters like to act like, I mean, there are, I mean, that's why Joe Rogan makes Joe Rogan kind of money despite spewing. Again, he panders. He's great at the pandering. He's fantastic at the medium, but there's a lot of dishonesty that goes on that I find horrifying. But
See, here's the thing
I'm
about
telling you,
Joe is, and
people
he,
just need 15,000. If you just have fifteen
yeah,
thousand people that want to listen to you every day, you could probably make $1 million a year. And it's crazy.
probably. I mean, someone
And
like
that's what
Joe
people
is
pander
like,
to.
I think a lot of his success, and I love Joe. I think as a guy, he's a great
Oh,
guy.
as a comedian, he's fucking hilarious.
And as a
I mean,
comic, but as a
right.
person, he's a great guy, and he's arguably the most supportive comedian of
Yeah.
comedy I think I've ever met.
But when he gets people on his podcast, he tends to agree with them, whether he agrees with them or not. And it leads to the dissemination and proliferation. And it has, especially in the arena of the pandemic, of a lot of nonsense.
See, here's
right?
the thing, though, is I don't listen to the podcast. And sorry,
Yeah,
Joe,
I will have my producers and they'll send me clips and this and that, and I'm like, because like I don't like talking about. I stopped talking about COVID because I cost myself a bunch of listeners,
right.
and I talked about it all the time, and I felt like I had this moral obligation to be like, no, y'all need to take this seriously, And I was in the vaccine trials, I was getting a shot when I didn't know what the fuck they were sticking in my arm.
Right.
Because I thought it was what Americans should do for America, and well, not just America, but for the world. Like people needed to step forward and get these shots, and
yes,
okay,
and
we're
going to use this as a segue to get to what
sorry, the real stuff.
49 minutes ago, but that's fine. I have no problem with just like jumping around, especially that to me is the hallmark of like you're having a good conversation on a podcast when it can just kind of go and you feel fine about it, and so I think we're doing great.
Ted, that was you telling me to shut the fuck up and let you ask the questions. I mean, let's not lie to the audience.
But we actually, according to my notes, already started with the questions because I asked about your background and different things that you've sort of done over the years. Because I think that's important too. I don't want to just be like, my friend, he's a lawyer anyway. So you have been at this for decades, and you have a long history with in law in Texas too, which I find very interesting. And I don't know. I didn't get into your expertise when it comes to like constitutional law and that kind of stuff. But do you, or would you say you're well versed in like
Yeah,
the?
I mean, like, so the focus of my master's of law at Harvard was it was law teaching, but it was really constitutional law, and
Okay,
it. But in the practice, obviously, I worked at a court of appeals. And you deal with a lot of, and as a criminal defense attorney, you deal with a segment of the Constitution. And
okay,
lawyers like to call themselves constitutional lawyers. Most of them are full of shit, right? It's very rare for you to make a living just broadly arguing, but the real
right.
rub is these aren't complicated issues. People try to portray them as complicated issues, but they're not. And you don't have to be a legal scholar to understand it. In fact, it's all the parsing and bullshit
Yeah.
that, and I mean, because they're just not. They're very basic legal issues that are very well settled that people are trying to act like they aren't.
But the hard part
And
now is like, say for just a guy like me who has no, background in law. I
yeah,
read the Constitution. I don't know. The last time I read it was a decade ago. Like, and
you didn't
so
read
I'll
it
sit
that way.
here and I'll go, oh well, now people are saying, it's my constitutional rights infringing on my civil liberties to have to get this vaccine in order to go to a concert or work for this, you know, work for the government or work for wherever, even a private entity. So then I go and I start Googling, and then you end up
Right.
reading like an actual like legal brief and you're just like, I what, none of these things make sense, and then you just start getting lost in like this article about that, and then we kind of get back to what we were talking about earlier where it's like people are speaking to their echo chambers and telling them what they want to hear, and then you got to sift
Right.
through what's true and what's not. And it's hard. I personally, I was like, there's no fucking way that it's infringing on anyone's civil liberties. But to people that say that it is, or to people that go, I don't know, like my answer was, well, let me ask a lawyer who does know.
Right.
So tell
So
me, if someone were to come to you and say, Charles, it is infringing on my civil liberties to have to get this vaccine, what do you say to that guy,
well,
girl?
usually it'll be in the context of employment, right? I've heard the
Yes.
question a lot in the context of employment, sometimes academic, because they're not talking about widespread mandates at this point, like just general population mandates. Although some people that are proponents of it, there might be a question there, right?
Okay.
But in terms of employment or education, it's nothing new. And by nothing new, you can go all the way back. So George Washington, I think it was and I didn't look any of this up. You told me to talk about it, but I didn't research it all because I just know this shit. So he was in the Caribbean as a teenager, as a child, right? And I think it was the Dominican Republic, although I'm not sure. And he was exposed to the pox and almost died, right? He had scars on his face. And, you don't realize it because you don't see actual photographs of George Washington. You see paintings of
Yeah, the paintings. He was
him. And
probably like, "Can you leave out the
yeah,
hideous
the pock
scars that are
marks.
all over my
But
body?"
he almost died from it. And so he took the pox very seriously, as he should. More American revolutionary soldiers, pre-American, but revolutionary soldiers died from the pox, from smallpox epidemic, than they did from actual battle, right?
Wow.
And in many colonies, inoculation, which is where they cut you and give you a little bit of it, but a precursor to modern vaccination,
Yeah.
uh, it was illegal, right? But he believed in it. And so much so that he encouraged Martha to do it to show the general public that it was safer than getting the pox. And then in many of his camps, he didn't let you either inoculated or you couldn't come the fuck in, right?
Oh
And
wow.
people say, well, that's just the military. That was not the case at all, right? There were supporters of the what we call now patriots. At the time, they were terrorists trying to overthrow the government that wanted to be in the they were loyal to the colonies, not loyalists to the crown, and they wanted to go into Washington's camp, just regular citizens for the safety. And
Oh
Washington
wow.
was like, no, fuck you, get inoculated, then you can come in, right? So if you look all the way back down to the dawn of America, inoculation was far more dangerous than vaccination, right?
Yeah.
Than its standard. But we have had, and people, they rushed this vaccine. Now, they rushed polio to some degree, and everyone lined up to get it. But we have had mandatory vaccinations for a very long time. We've also had the government being allowed to stop people from coming into areas of the country during a pandemic for the
Yes.
last 200 years. It's happened several times, and the courts have always said okay. But mandatory vaccines are nothing new, right? And people are acting like it is, but it's fucking not. You've always had to be vaccinated since either of us were alive. You
Yep.
always had to be vaccinated to go to school. There were plenty of
Yes.
jobs that required it. And there are exceptions. And the exceptions are a sincerely held religious belief, or under the Americans with Disabilities Act, you have some sort of disability that precludes you from getting it.
Yeah.
But even then, it just requires the employer or the school to come up with a reasonable accommodation. If there's not a reasonable accommodation, which the argument is for a highly transmissible airborne virus, there's not really an accommodation that'll make you safe to be around people,
Uh-huh.
then you're shit out of fucking luck. But you have all these people exploiting it. Like you had a pastor in Oklahoma and I think one in Florida that were selling, well, for a donation, you could get a religious exemption for the vaccine. The law
Jesus.
doesn't even fucking require a pastor to sign off on it. You don't have some religious, you got to go get the priest, you know, he's going to pull out his dick, you
Yeah.
suck it, he gives you, no, I'm kidding. But you don't,
Yeah,
you don't
yeah.
have to do anything except express that I have this religious belief, and then there's an evaluation as whether it's sincere. Then you also have a chiropractor, I think also in Florida, because Florida, that was selling exemptions. Like, oh no, you can't take it. Well,
Man, people are
again,
so
that doesn't
crazy.
fucking cut it. Right. Well, first of all, I mean, chiropractors, they can adjust your fucking back and all that, but you know, if you're going to your chiropractor to talk about viruses, well,
Yeah, that's especially stupid. So here, the very little research I did, I found
yeah.
this, and hold on a sec. Let me see if I can pull this thing up. Are you seeing a article on your screen?
I am not. I just see you
Okay,
and
that's
me, a
not
little
good.
bitty thing on the bottom. You
Um,
can tell.
well, I guess I can't really. Hold on. Let's see if this.
I
So,
do now. Yeah.
okay. Um, so I found this on Politico, and there's apparently some 1905 case that
Right.
involved smallpox.
Right.
So this guy claimed that he didn't want to get smallpox, or I'm sorry, he didn't want to get the vaccine because he had contracted smallpox or got a vaccine for something else that like
Right.
gave him a bad reaction, right? So
Right.
he sued, and the Supreme Court in 1905 told him to go fuck himself.
Right. And now you would actually, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is far more recent than 1905, you'd have a stronger claim that if you have a medical issue associated with that would, it's a disability, a definable disability that would make it that the
Uh-huh.
vaccine would exacerbate, then you might have an argument. But then again, it's just a reasonable accommodation. But no, vaccines aren't anything new, right? You're
Right.
doing what my law school son does. He'll break out some case from 100 years ago and ask me about it and ask me if I remember. I'm like, son, I forgot. I was unlike you. I was working night shift patrol and going to school, and I don't, just get to go to school and go to school. But you don't remember the cases. You remember the rules, right?
Okay.
Like you remember, and it's a very, very simple thing. Yes, the fucking government can tell you have to get a vaccine to participate in shit, and while it may not be able to mandatorily require all of America to get the vaccine,
Uh-huh.
it has a great number of mechanisms to do it. Like as Biden did it through OSHA, right? So
Mm-hmm.
OSHA has this very broad based authority to protect people in the workplace. So
Yes.
that's what they're doing with employees over 100, and they've narrowly tailored it to make it harder to challenge. But people who aren't studying don't realize, like a lot of these shortages, like the chicken shortage in America,
Mm-hmm.
it's not because we're running out of fucking chickens. It's because in the immigrant communities that largely man these chicken processing units, COVID went through there like a fucking specter of death, just killing
Really?
people left and right. Yeah, and
Wow.
these Tyson and these other giant corporations didn't really do much early on to protect people. At least that's the legal argument, allegedly. been on
Uh,
there, and it's led to the shortages. I mean, workplaces have been very, very dangerous. A lot of courtrooms the courthouses shut down and you were doing Zoom. But then when it became politicized, a lot of Republican judges started insisting on having court. I've known a number of lawyers that have gotten sick and died or just gotten horribly sick.
wow,
I
really?
mean, it's fucking, it's crazy. Greg Abbott, our governor here in Texas, he's a fucking moron. You know,
That's
you
what they're
know,
saying. Yeah.
yeah, well, he's a fucking pander. And don't get me wrong, I think Hunter Biden got caught red-handed selling influence with his laptop, and y'all, the mainstream media doesn't care. Social media shut it down. I mean, it's not a binary for me. I think there's evil all across the board.
Sure. Yeah.
But fucking DeSantis and in Florida and Abbott here in Texas, they have just pandered so hard. And I say this as someone that was against the lockdowns, right? Like, I do think that the Constitution and economic liberty were trampled with these economic lockdowns. I think instead there should have been
So
capacity limits. There should have been mandatory pragmatism. I think the government lied to us early on about masking because I think the government was trying to amass enough PPE for the government that they were telling people earlier we didn't need masks, we didn't need gloves, and I think a lot of the lies that the government told early on are what provided a firmament for the people to say all this shit is lies when it's not, right?
right.
Um, but so while I think the economic lockdowns, I think there was an argument there legally saying, hey, the government can, and especially with like landlords have been vilified, right? Evil landlords,
Hmm.
but the majority of landlords aren't these multinational or big billion-dollar companies. It's individuals that own homes and that
Right.
they lease them out. And I think that was a taking under the takings clause, not allowing them to evict people. And you hear so many stories of people that just didn't pay their fucking rent.
Yeah.
And, even people that could, because there are unscrupulous people that take advantage. And
Sure.
not to say there's not plenty of evil landlords out there, because there is,
Yeah.
but I mean, so I do think that there were some issues, especially and I say this as a small business person. And then you had you know, the way, like, I didn't lay anyone off, right? And I was just burning my own fucking money, and I didn't fire anybody. And you had so many employers that were taking government funds and still firing everybody and just
Yeah.
pocketing the money. And we had all these churches, all these fucking TV preachers getting millions of dollars in stimulus relief. Like, our stimulus was so stupidly done, right? And then when we were actually giving checks to people, it was a cutoff. Basically, if you made enough money to really pay income tax, you didn't get anything. Whereas you look at Britain, what they did was they said, hey, if you make this much money, we're going to pay you this much percentage of that, right? So the more you contributed to the tax base, the more you actually made. But everyone was getting taken care of. But it was
Yeah.
going to individuals, not corporations. It was just a huge evil corporate payout, right?
Yeah.
And the Democrats are just to as blame as the Republicans. And they're just, your listeners will hate this, but Alexander Ocasio Cortez and Donald Trump are the same politician lying to different groups of gullible people,
I've
right?
heard that said before. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, Sandy Cortez became this character, right? And she's great at it. She's a masterful politician, but she just fucking lies all the time. Now, I think she lies to a more sympathetic group of people than Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump lies to a less sympathetic group, and he engages in a lot more self-dealing and robbed America blind, and people still want to, there's grown fucking heterosexual men that would gladly lick his taint and fucking jack him off.
Yeah.
And I don't get that. But I mean,
Yeah.
we're just defined by people that are willing to fucking lie to us. And I do think that our government did a bad job with the stimulus. I think they left a lot of people, especially in the middle, just fucking out of the cold. We saw so many businesses go under, restaurants. I think what New York City did to both its citizens and businesses was a trampling of the Constitution, and courts were too scared to do anything about it. So when I can't say that everything was okay, because I disagreed with a lot, but on the vaccine side, oh, it's fucking well fucking settled. No one's getting any traction in that. And frankly, if you want to be vaccine hesitant, that's fine. And I'm not one of those people. Like,
But
I
they're
don't think
still
the
out
people
there
that,
yelling about it. They're still out there going, "I'm not doing it because of the Constitution," and they're still going to
but if
believe it.
they're saying it honestly, like if they believe
They're
it,
not.
I support them. Well, but there are the people that do, right? There are people who are protesting and they believe it. The vaccine hesitant, then there's people call them stupid. They're not stupid. Some of them might be gullible, and some of them might be stupid, but a lot of them have been lied to, and they've been lied to by the people that we were talking about earlier, people that were willing to fucking lie to them to be popular and make money. And instead of condemning them as kind of what we need to be doing is just engaging those people. I say that, and I try to do it for a year and a half, and I just got tired of it. Right? You get tired of people threatening you, and I find that shit funny, but you get just tired of all the belligerence.
Yeah, that's why I
And
don't want to do a podcast like that. You just get
yeah,
tired of that. It's like, ugh,
well,
you know.
no, I mean, if you do a podcast where you say it's all a hoax and a fraud and it's all a lie, you're in an echo chamber of applause, right? But like I try to talk to people, look, I get that you're vaccine hesitant, but you really, because it's like this, it's not a new vaccine. And then people love to trot out those flipper pictures for the nausea medication in the 50s that women took while they're pregnant and kids were born with flippers. They
Yeah.
see the FDA. That drug was never approved in America. No one ever had that in America. Those flipper pictures are from horrible birth defects from other countries, right? Some of them came to America to get medical treatment,
That's what
but
I
the
mean. People are
American,
just so ready to grab any sort
right,
of like insane looking photo, and because it elicits this immediate like, and then they just post it on their Facebook and the shit catches fire. But like, I mean,
right, like
just
someone dies
yesterday.
after they get a vaccine, right? It just goes all, I just can't help to replay, but there's no causation, there's no link, there's no real discussion.
Yeah.
And like, I wouldn't have, so Johnson & Johnson, oh, it was causing blood clots. But when you look at the numbers, the blood clots associated with Johnson & Johnson were at the same level as in the general population, so they don't really know. But I did a bunch of research. Like, I cheated, right? When I signed up for the trials, you had to sign up for all of them. And I didn't want AstraZeneca, and I didn't want Johnson & Johnson. I wanted one of the messenger RNA ones. I ended up getting a placebo, so it didn't really help me anyway. But I looked up and saw where Pfizer was giving the shots in Pearland, and I had an office in Pearland. So when they assigned me to a place to go take it, I said, hey, I want to do it, but can I go to this place in Pearland? It's near my office. And that's how I ended up getting the Pfizer program. The messenger RNA is nothing new. It's 2 decades. What they did was they took it and they tweaked it for COVID. But the great thing is big pharmaceutical companies, which are evil. Like the opioid crisis was big pharm trying to get in on the Afghani, Colombian, Mexican cartel narco terrorist trade. That's all it is, right? Synthetic opioids were big pharm feeling left out from the drug business, and they wanted to get in. The Sackler family made their fucking money, and no one cared. I'm not one of those who just accept, but here, they were never incentivized to do a lot of really groundbreaking research on vaccines, because here's the thing with vaccines, they fix shit. And big pharma doesn't want to fix anything. They want to maintain shit.
And then
right?
create a new drug that'll
Right.
help
That
the
you have to take
previous
every fucking day. Like I could take a pill every day to fucking keep the hair, right? But I didn't do it, right? I got married young and it worked out for me.
Right,
For people that have HIV, for people that have herpes, for people it's just take a pill every day. And personally, I don't think they really want to cure cancer, because I don't think the global population could handle the more people living from. And of course, if you read about what McDonald's does to their fucking food before, I'll say this, I don't go get nuggets
they
afterwards,
inject it
but
with cancer.
they wash it with fucking like solvents, and I mean it's fucking horrible.
Yeah, it's
but so I don't think Big Pharma really wants, but now because of the pandemic, and I will say this, so when people, oh, you can't, when Trump's called the China virus, the problem is he's painting a portrait of the Chinese people, right? And this was very much created in that Wuhan laboratory. But it has nothing to do. The Chinese people,
proven though, that it was created there.
You've had whistleblowers that were largely ignored.
Okay.
And you've had these applications that just came out last week that were, but here's
people have just been, they twisted that fact to make it sound like these.
But when you look at
Chinese
the bones of
like,
it, right? If you look at the bones of it, this just couldn't have occurred naturally. It was the subject of gain of function research. but it's not the Chinese people, and it's most certainly not Chinese Americans. Like people want to talk about people of
Right, right,
Chinese
yeah, yeah.
descent. Is there? I mean, fucking Chinese
Yes.
Americans are fucking Americans. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
it's the Chinese government, and who suffers the most from the authoritarian? Because it's not people. It's communists. They're not fucking communists. It's an authoritarian, despotic regime that allows zero fucking freedom. China's real safe, right, for the people that the government ain't mad at. But
Yeah.
the Chinese government is fucking evil, and no one suffers more than the Chinese people. But if you talk to older Chinese people, people in China were starving before Mao's revolution, fucking
Yes.
starving to death, right? And they're like, you know what? I don't give a fuck if the government reads every message. If the government's, you know what? I got something to eat every fucking day. I
Yeah.
can do my
Give
Tai
me
Chi at the
food.
park.
Yes.
Worrying about freedom is a luxury, right? That it's nice
Right.
to enjoy. But I'm still very pro freedom. But the Chinese government, when you talk about it, this is their creation. And then they lied, right? They lied about the pandemic early and allowed it to proliferate. And the WHO did help them. Like the Taiwanese CDC came out in December of 2019, late December, and said, this is fucking airborne. It's highly contagious.
Yeah.
And nobody listened because the WHO didn't want to accept the Taiwanese CDC's information
Right.
because China doesn't recognize them.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard to get accurate information, especially because it was all originating from a place that does its best to control all
Right.
information everywhere. So it was like, how are we ever going to know for the next like year? And then, now
Oh,
it's
I
all
think we know.
starting to come
I
out.
think we
But
know. But who cares where it came from? It's a real fucking thing, right?
yeah, yeah, of
And
course.
then Trump, early on, he was kind of aggressive about, hey, we need to stop this. But then he just decided he picked the wrong horse, and he picked the horse of this isn't real. And there are a lot of
Yes.
people that loudly cheer about that shit. And he did, as he stepped to the front line for everything, but he pandered to the this is a hoax crowd. And it ultimately probably cost him the election, which he lost, right?
Of course, yeah.
Like, well, you say, of course, there are so many people that just so rabidly believe
Yeah, I mean,
that
it's a lot of
until
the same people that don't believe,
right,
that
a lot
they
of overlap,
yeah,
a
I
lot
mean
of
that you
overlap.
need to get the vaccine or that they need, any or taking like, off-market drugs that haven't been approved by the FDA because so and so said that it's bad because just everything that the other side says is a
We just
lie.
had
So
that.
it's
We went to a comedy show Saturday night. What the fuck was his name? Starts with an R. But we'd seen him at the store with you, but a younger Hispanic comic, probably a little bit younger.
Francisco Ramos. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
Francisco.
saw it on your
Right.
thing. Yeah.
So, well, he was doing a little COVID bit, and there was a guy sitting there. Of course, we were in the front row, and there's a guy sitting next to a table next to us who started saying how he takes Intervectin every 15 days
For the
as
horse
a
dewormer. Yeah,
right. He takes it every 15 days as a. He didn't use the word prophylactic because he was stupid,
yeah. Right.
but fucking Francisco was like, "What the fuck are you talking? Has anyone ever no one's ever recommended it. It doesn't fucking work. People just make this shit up in their head, or they hear it on the radio or a
Yeah.
podcast, they believe it, and it's just you know
So
it's
okay, like
fucking
so
crazy.
basically, what do you say to people that are saying something like, it infringes on my constitutional right to do
But
this,
doesn't,
when
right? I mean, you need to do the research
but that's
on
that's
the
so that's
ability of the
my
government
that's my question
to.
is where does the average person accurately do some research as opposed to because the average
That's
person
hard to
is
do,
is
right?
going to
It's hard to
type in
research the law. That's why the
right.
law degrees exist, right? It's hard to go and research case law
Yes.
and all that. I mean,
Yes.
if people tell me, I'll explain. I said, look, it's very well settled. If you look at you remember as a kid, you got vaccines interestingly enough, one of the first cases I worked on at the Houston Court of Appeals, 14th Court of Appeals, as a briefing attorney, my first year as a lawyer, was a murder investigation where a daycare owner, but a licensed daycare, was accused to have shaken baby syndrome, right? And the child had gotten her vaccinations earlier that day. And their argument, which I was actually sold on, reading all the science, was that the girl had anaphylactic shock and that the
Okay.
woman was completely innocent. She was convicted because people want to, protect children. But so I spent months, and my judges disagreed. I did spend months researching all this, and there are dangers with vaccines, right?
Yeah.
But this messenger RNA is much safer than it's probably the safest vaccine ever created. You do have some
And
teenage
what's
boys.
crazy is there are people that I don't know where they're getting this information, but they're convinced it's the most dangerous one ever
Right,
created,
because
and it's they think
they're
there's
seeing.
robots in it. It's like they're insane.
Well, that's not they're insane. See, that's the thing. They're seeing screenshots on social media, and people believe social media. Like I was at Harvard at the law school, not the college, but when they set the Facebook up, and I'm like, that's fucking stupid.
Yeah.
And I didn't even have. So my main social media is Instagram, but I didn't have any social media until like 2015, and it was a client of mine, a hip hop artist, Bun B from UGK. Me, him, and his wife and my wife were at a football game, and his wife was making fun of me for not having an Instagram. So I set an Instagram up, and I've killed like I had a much larger Twitter, and I killed it because I just hate fucking Twitter. Like people are
Yeah.
just so toxic.
Yeah.
I've like when beat people up over Twitter. I don't know. It's people just think they can say whatever and they're anonymous, and then they find out that you have a full time investigator and you can find them and go fucking punch them. And I'm not recommending it. It's illegal. You shouldn't do it. I get away with that shit because I'm an ex cop, judge, lawyer. They can do
Yeah.
shit. But I mean, there are some things about social media that are very toxic, and I also think there are some great things about social media. I think it makes the world smaller. I think it allows you to stay in touch with your friends.
Yes.
But it's like anything. It's all in degrees. I love fucking drinking, so I only do it once a week, and I'm a nice drunk, right? I mean, you know this. I drink. I'm nice. I'm nice. I'm tired. I need to go to bed. That's me.
Yeah.
Like that's the whole
That
fucking thing. It's
literally
never
is.
I'm gonna fight. Like, if I'm gonna fight, it's I'm mad and I'm sober, right?
Yes.
But I know that I can't. I'd love to do it every day. I fucking love it. Like anyone that said I fucking love being drunk. I don't even care what. Oops, sorry. I don't even care about what I'm drinking. I just love fucking drinking,
Yeah.
right? So I don't do it every day. And social media is another thing that you've got to kind of take in moderation, or at least you've got to be a cynic about what you read. But there are a lot of people that can't do things in moderation, and they're not cynical.
Yeah.
They fucking see a meme or they see a screenshot and they fucking believe it. And then it always goes back to the unscrupulous who are trying to get the clicks, the links, the shots, because we have monetized that. And the media
Yeah.
is a lot to blame too. It's all headline journalism. And
Yeah, I mean, most people click on an article, they'll read the headline and go, "See," and then you get four
I will
paragraphs.
argue with people a lot because I'm an argumentative fuck, and people will constantly like send a link as if it supports their argument, and then I'll say, well, if you go to paragraph 4, it says that your very argument is fucking bullshit, right? Because people don't get past the opening incite, and that's the print media wants to incite you, television journalism wants to incite you. It's all about and that's really, and honestly, and it's all rooted in the interconnectivity of social media and the web. And I do think to some degree it's kind of destroying America.
So where do we go if mainstream print and TV journalism is
Well, I'm not saying that,
muddying
like,
things up and going after our emotions? Like, if I don't know anything about mRNA vaccines, like, where's the first place I should go to kind of
like me, I just went to medical journals and read it, but I read shit all day. That's what I do, right?
yeah.
I read stuff and I can, but I mean, honestly, you have to just on your own find your own trusted sources, but it's also best to, so like me, when I doing my show every day, and I'm not doing a show tonight because I got pissed off at fucking up the show last night. Well, the one guy, so I said re-air it because it didn't air a third of it. But like I will read from Mother Jones and the Huffington Post all the way to arch conservative shit. From
Yes.
just in New York for the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. And I try to read across the board on a singular subject, right? Like read a variety of stories, and then you kind of in your own mind you have to distill in what you believe and what you think is the truth. And that's what I try to do on the radio, right? Is well, this is what people are arguing here, and this is what people are arguing here, but this is what I fucking think. You can have it or not. But I don't know. Like, there's not one. It's not like when we
There
were
isn't
kids, when
one
we just go
website.
grab the encyclopedia and
Right,
read
right,
it.
right,
I mean,
right.
the internet makes everyone an expert.
Yes.
Everyone's a lawyer. Everyone's a doctor. Everyone's a comedian, even, right? Like nowadays, if you do a set once, it was your set, and you could use it for years.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Fucking on
Sometimes
Twitter.
even like a good photo where it looks
Right.
like you're confident on stage and people are smiling, they'll post that as if it's fucking I'm like a professional with a huge following, and then you go see him and you're like, you can barely string a sentence together. Like, all it takes is like the image or a good clip, and you can run with that shit for forever. And
Right. I mean, everyone's a fucking expert in shit now, and
yeah.
it's But so I don't know. I think you just have to, yeah, I think you have to locate voices that you trust. But I really think if people would just start having more conversations with people they disagree with and having civil
Yes.
conversations. But there's some people that are incapable. Like I kind of got into it with a buddy of mine on Twitter, and
Well, I mean, Twitter's the
finally,
last place to have a
and I
civil.
just fucking had enough. Somebody I know in the real world, but it's somebody that's vaccinated but preaches to the unvax idiots.
Yes.
And he just, but he just wants to be angry all the time about and it's just like, man, I just don't give a fuck, man. Like, say whatever you want, but because I want to engage people, but if people engage me, I am, you know, I will refuse to concede, right? Like I'm not looking to other people's social media pages to start arguments, but if people bring the
Right.
argument to me, I'm gonna make the point that you're a fucking moron and this is fucking why, and over again. And then if you get
Yeah.
butthurt about it, well, you want
Yeah.
to, what do you want to do? You want to go be men about it, and fucking punch each other a few times, I mean, I don't give a fuck.
Right.
But it's the thing is people don't want to talk anymore. People don't want to have these conversations. People only want to talk to people they agree with. People just want to, and
Yeah,
how
that's boring.
boring is that, right? It's not
Very boring.
interesting. But people also don't want to talk. Like, I don't know. It's sad, man. It's fucking sad. America, we're fucking sad. And it's not just America, it's the whole fucking world. But at least in America, we still have more opportunity for success than anywhere else. And I think America is actually the leader. Like, although people look to social media and the media and think it defines this country. But I think we are. Although a lot of the vaccine technology came from Germany, the basis for it, the science for it, was here in America. And I think we will get through it. Right? I think we're going to see a lot more people die, but I think eventually enough people will die and touch other people's lives. Like, have you known anyone too closely that has passed away from this?
No. I know a bunch of people have gotten sick from it, but no one.
Well, I mean, you're very lucky, right?
Yeah.
And as it touches people's lives, I think it changes a lot of attitudes. I mean, there's been famously several talk radio hosts who are sincere. You have the liars, right, that I can't stand, that act like they're against it, but really get it. But you've had several sincere ones that didn't want it and died. You have people like I had a friend of mine very early on before the vaccine was available that she died from. It was actually my chief clerk when I was a judge, and she was still the chief clerk at the court. Died in like 6 days. I've known a number of people that I'm 49, so it's more in the wheelhouse of death, and it's I mean it's fucking horrible, right? And anywhere
It is.
I really get pissed when you hear people minimizing it, right? And it's like you know because they don't understand the math of it, right? Oh, it's only 1.5% mortality rate. Well, how many fucking people are in America?
Yeah,
I
it's a
don't
lot of
know.
fucking people.
Well,
It's
do
like
the math
crazy.
on 1.5% because the flu is like 0.0001%. It'll show a point 0.1, but it's actually lower than
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah, they'll throw
like,
these numbers out as if it's like they think it's like 60 people or something. It's like it's
right,
so many
it's
thousands.
1 in 500 Americans have died from it, and
Yeah, I
more
mean,
people have
especially
died
when
from
they
this
don't
than the
have
Civil
to
War.
be. It's
Right, you
crazy
have
that
so many
they're
people. So, did you run out right away and get it when you were
fuck
available to?
yeah. I
Yeah,
immediately got it.
and like I hate not living. Like we bought a house in the middle of the pandemic. We lived in this penthouse, and I just didn't leave the penthouse for like fucking year.
Yeah.
I fucking hate it because I'm a social person by nature. Not only do I like drinking, I like the social. I don't drink by myself, right? Like if I'm alone at home, I would never consider opening a bottle.
Yeah, that's
I
not
like the
fun.
social aspect of
Yeah.
drinking. I like the social aspect of doing. I like fucking doing stuff with people. I like people, and that was another thing that it did is it polarized people so much and separated people so much that I mean, I don't know.
I mean,
It's fucking sad, man. It's
it is
really
sad. I mean, I think
fucking
that
sad.
like in my personal opinion, I think that the vaccine hesitancy and all that stuff is, and when I said earlier that they're insane, I was just using that as just a figure of speech, but
They're
I
fucking
think
insane.
it's what
You're right. People are fucking insane,
some
but
of
it's
them are,
okay.
yeah. But I
But
think a lot of the people like, hanging on to these things that like, especially like conspiracies that are founded on like next to nothing and conflating like the government telling me to do this immediately with like constitutional rights and that sort of stuff, I think is it's more about like long standing divides and like a feeling that like the country has been letting them down for decades. And I think it's all just sort of coming out in the latest, you know, topic of the moment, which, you know, decades ago, before there was like a 24-hour news cycle, it would be like people would get mad at like one topic for like 5 years. You know, now it's
Right.
like one thing every 4 weeks.
Well, we
It's
have
like
a lot to be mad about. I mean, think about
we
so we got
do.
this $3.5 trillion, right? $3.5 fucking trillion. Where's the universal free tuition for in-state schools?
Yeah.
Where is the universal health care? Where's
Yeah.
the universal child
Yeah.
care? What the Democratic Party is largely doing is they are trying to get participatory Americans. I think, like Obama yesterday was talking about, well, we're just going to go, I need to pay more. You're fucking post-monetary. You're worth like $200 million. What does it matter to you? We're
Yeah.
going after the billionaires. You're not going after the billionaires if you're
They'll find a
raising
way around
taxes
it.
on people making 400 grand a year.
Yeah.
You're not going after the billionaires if you're implementing, with bipartisan support, new oversight on bank accounts for transactions $600 and more. You're not going after billionaires if you're raising the audit budget by $79 billion.
Yeah.
You're going after middle class and upper middle class Americans because we, or even me who makes a good living, I'm a wage earner. I get my money, I spend it on my wife and kids, right?
Would you say this? Would you say that
And, you know,
laws are only enforceable on the people who can't afford to find their way around them? So like billionaires
almost
will
certainly. So, like
always
tax
find their
laws,
way
right?
around, right?
So people talk about going after Trump for his taxes. He's secure. He's layered. He has accountants and lawyers between him and that tax
Right.
filing. So he doesn't have any fucking liability. You have to prove that he actually knew, right? And it's
Yeah.
never going to fucking happen.
Right.
And he's a fake billionaire. Legitimate billionaires. I mean, people that are when the AOC and when I'm mad at Barack because Barack was just he got a layup from ABC and he was just lying, right? And it's like, come on, Barry, you're better than this, man. But they're not going after the billionaires. They're telling the participatory upper middle class, you need to pay more and have less. And we're not doing anything for the lower middle class, right? What we should be doing with $3.5 trillion is fucking, and I had this will piss people off that want the student loans. Student loan forgiveness doesn't fix the problem. It just creates another problem. Instead, what we should be doing, right, is instead of looking back, we should be looking forward to the next generation and saying, hey, and I'm saying this as a person that's already saved up tons of money and spent it on my kids' education, right?
Yes.
We need to tell the next generation, you know what? If you work hard in fucking high school, you're going to be able to go to fucking school and get your not just your undergraduate degree, but if you're going to go in state to a public school, you can get your bachelor's degree, you can get your fucking law degree, your engineering degree, your whatever the fuck, you can just go do it, right?
For free.
Because people that actually go to school and participate and then get jobs and participate, they fucking pay taxes, right? But instead, we keep talking about doing all this shit. And then this new thing on the left is saying, well, we're going to do this, but we're only going to do it for everybody but white men because it's this false scarcity, right? You did in Harris County, they had this grant program for businesses, but it was everyone but white men, right? And then white men use it to justify more racism, and it's crazy, and there's this false scarcity. Of course, on the right, they don't want to fucking help anybody except the rich stay rich, right?
Yes.
And they pander on the abortion issue, and they pander on, it's just so.
So what do you think? Why do you think something as on its face, something as simple as taking $1 trillion and giving anyone who's 17, about to be 18, a free ride in college? Why do you think that's so difficult to just implement?
Well, because no one's really incentivized to do it. It's like immigration, right? We have to have a controlled border, but we need a more fluid border, right? Like by having a fully open border, right, which is what we have. I mean, the people talk about 1 million. We probably had 3 million people illegally enter through the southern border, right? And I think immigration is a good thing. Right? I think it's good for America. But I think when people come to this country and break the law, they should have to go home, right? Wherever that shitty home may be, right? You don't get to break the law. But again, I think we should also have all drugs legalized and do it. When I'm saying come here and commit violence, because it's not really if you're a refugee from the violent crime in Nicaragua, if the violent criminals come with you, then you're not fucking and obviously the crime is in there. But it's harder for the open border makes it harder for Lebanese refugees to come And for Jamaicans, like I love Jamaica, and it's like a lottery system. It's so hard, and you'll talk to these Jamaicans. The hardest, culturally, in my opinion, the hardest fucking working people in the world are found in Jamaica. Right? It's such a wonderful culture that
I mean, the
United
Liberties
Kingdom,
work pretty hard.
that
Let's not discount.
the United Kingdom exploited, abandoned, and then kept all the expensive property and then walked away from their obligations. It's
Yes,
fucking
yes.
disgusting. It's the worst example of colonialism in this hemisphere, in my opinion. Right? At least I'm familiar with. But Jamaicans have a very hard time immigrating to the United States, as do Haitians. People think the Haitians that were just on the border, which most of them were let in, came from Haiti. They didn't. They came from Brazil. They've been in Brazil for years, and it's this whole crazy scheme. We shouldn't have a fucking crazy scheme. We should make it far more easy for people to come to the border, especially Mexicans, right? People from Mexico, and say, "Hey, this is who I am. This is why I want to come here." And get your fingerprints, get a blood draw, get your DNA. Let them fucking come into this country with a fucking ID so they can fucking buy insurance and they can fucking pay taxes and they can contribute to this wonderful society and grasp at the brass ring of America, right?
Right.
And that's what we need, but we're not incentivized in participation. So the Republicans don't want to fix immigration because they're beholden to companies that need the exploited free near slave labor, right? The
Yeah.
Democrats don't want to fix it because they see it as their vehicle to total domination because the Republicans are too stupid to make inroads into communities of color. And they think eventually, the demographics are going to change so much that we'll take Texas and we'll take Arizona and we're going to take, but it's really none of it's good for Americans when it's not controlled, right? And we don't want the bad criminals, which are the exception. Like people love this myth about demonizing immigrants. Immigrants are far more law-abiding than American citizens. Immigrants are far less prone to get on the dole than American citizens, right? And immigrants actually achieve more, right? If you look at raising more Americans wallow than immigrants do, right? But we have to have
Yeah.
control. But neither side is incentivized to fix it. They don't. We have people go to Washington to become plutocrats now, right? It's a vehicle for great wealth. We saw it with Barack Obama. And Barack Obama went from Harvard Law School to activist in Chicago to state senator to president, and he's an amazing politician, right? He's him and Ronald. Whereas let's say AOC and Trump are very similar. Obama and Ronald Reagan were very similar in their political styling. I'm not saying in their policies
Yeah, I
at all,
agree with that. Yeah.
but they looked off in the fucking distance.
Yeah.
And Obama was more express with it. You just fucking hope, right?
Yeah.
And Reagan was more. And I was a kid, I was 8 years old when Reagan and I liked it. Talked about the city on the hill, right?
Yes.
And I grew up in Austin, so my mom hated Reagan. I
Yeah,
grew up
yeah.
in a very liberal hippy dippy home, but Clinton, Bill, not Hillary, right? Like Hillary lost. I called it very early, right? I knew Hillary was losing because she was lecturing America. Nobody wants to lecture, right? And Trump wasn't a good politician, but he just got lucky, got against a bad opponent, and he demonized. He said horrible things about immigrants, right? He was willing to vilify whomever, but Barack Obama, this inspiring hope, whereas Biden just won because Trump lost, right? Like Biden didn't win, Trump
Kind of the
lost.
inverse of the 2016
Right, but
election.
neither of them are at all, neither parties are at all interested in fixing America or helping working class Americans. Although I do think the Democrats have more policies that benefit the lower working class Americans and clearly the poor. They seem to want to create this base of people dependent on their party. And the Republicans, to their credit, they're if you want to be left alone and you want to keep more of your money, right? Like people, oh, how can you vote Republican? Well, I just don't want to pay more fucking taxes, right? And that's a legitimate. Democrats think that's an illegitimate response, but it is.
You don't want to pay more taxes because it's not being used in the right places.
No, people don't want to pay more taxes because they want to take the fucking money and spend it on themselves. So they want to take the money and
But
spend it on their kids.
I'm saying very specifically, I'm saying if your taxes were going to go up in order to fund free tuition for all Americans going to college, you'd be okay with that, right? And certain things that you saw,
I pay more because I'm very conservative. Like I'm not aggressive at all, and my tax bill is so much, right? Like that, as a small business, my business will, let's say my law firm here will grow 700 or 800 grand a year, right? Unless I have some big case, And I've got a couple of lawyers, I've got staff, who I pay very well. I got all this overhead, and then I'll keep X number of dollars, and I pay another huge chunk of it in taxes. And I'm paying all kind of it's six figures in taxes. I personally think that we could have a lot more austerity and cut away a lot of the loopholes. See, the really rich people, right? Like I earn money and I spend it, and I do extravagant stuff and I'm extravagant with my kids, but I'm a wage earner still. But the really rich people who aren't wage earners, who just live off, they borrow money against their stock holdings and they don't realize any income, so it's all a fucking scam. There's all these loopholes where the post monetary can exploit to not pay any fucking taxes, and that's the
Right.
real problem with the tax code. Is that it's too fucking arcane. There's too many loopholes that both the Democrats and the Republicans have just built for the very, very, very rich, because that's who all of those fuckers work for. And when
That's
you
what,
say
yeah,
that, you say,
that's basically what I'm asking is like if in a dream world, we were able
yeah,
to simplify the tax code and sort of send
it'll never
money.
happen. We're never going to see any change. Like, because then who do you vote for? Libertarians? I've been to a libertarian convention.
Oh no, I wouldn't.
They're
No.
fucking stupid
Yeah,
and they're
yeah,
fucking insane.
yeah.
They don't want schools or cops or
They don't
fucking
live. They don't.
firemen or whatever.
They don't live in
I
the
mean,
modern world. They don't. They don't know what they're
well,
doing.
some of them do, but it's all bullshit,
Yeah.
right? So we're just stuck playing, Sophie's choice politically. And there are so you have a lot of regular middle Americans who are just like, look, well, I don't use drugs. The Republicans aren't going to legalize drugs, but they're going to take less of my taxes. And if little Susie needs to get an abortion, I'll fly her to fucking New York. And so they just vote Republican. Whereas you have some people who are like, I just can't reconcile this shit. That I want marijuana legalized. The reproductive rights issue for me is the deal breaker. So they vote Democrat. But we don't have very many Americans on either side that are just like, oh, I love my party so much, I just fucking support them. Because at the end of the day, if you're half sensible, you know that almost everyone becomes a politician now to just become a plutocrat and get rich and fucking become post monetary, and then they don't have to worry about it. Because we have this whole new post monetary. Like, okay, so yeah, I
So
just made
I
a
mean,
let's say,
what do people like us do? And I know that we're very different in terms of like our
I mean, I'm trying to hopefully put my kids in a position where they can not ever have to, they'll be like, they won't have all the lean years that I had. Like my son will ask me about law school. I'm like, kid, what the fuck? I would get out of class. I would get in my patrol car. I would drive around for fucking 10 hours. I'd go work an extra hour at a bank. I'd go back to school. I wouldn't sleep, right? I don't remember anything, right? I want them to have this different experience, right? And I want them to have, because they're both very hard workers, right? But you have this growing class of people that were just born, they never had to worry about anything. They never had to worry about any money. And because we're not taxing their holdings, right? Their holdings just grow. What we should be doing is going after people that have, 30 million in fucking ass in tax, whether it's stocks or cash or whatever the fuck over. There should be a tax for those people, right? Just for their existence. But no one will ever fucking do it because that's what pissed me off. Barack was talking about billionaires. You're not going after fucking billionaires. You're fucking sucking billionaire dick. That's what both parties do, and they do everything for them. And I mean, that's the whole thing with AOC's Chick-fil-A dress, right?
mm-hmm.
It's just a fucking preen. Somebody that really believed what Congresswoman Cortez said, she wouldn't be at the fucking Met. She'd be outside the Met saying, you sorry motherfuckers, all of you, right? You virtue signaling bullshit fucking artists. You don't give a
Yeah.
shit about poor people. And that's like, for
Right.
me, not to blow my own horn, I do a tremendous amount of free legal work, right? Because I couldn't live with myself if I did. But the truth is, most people just don't fucking care. They don't care about other Americans. They don't care about anyone. They don't care about their kids. We just have just this wonderful society of fucking selfish fucking bastards. So yes,
Yeah.
when you ask me, would I be willing to pay more in taxes to make sure everyone had free college? Well, I wouldn't be one of those that said, well, I fucking didn't. I had to pay all my shit back.
Right.
Fuck them.
Right.
I don't believe in that. But
Yeah.
my rejoinder would be, I'd really rather see the government fucking close the loopholes for the super rich, stop wasting so fucking much money,
Yeah.
and prioritize it. Because what we should have
I mean,
is
that
we
would
should have
solve that problem, I
like,
guess, if
like
because then if you tax that money, you would all of a sudden have more money, and then you could be like, fine, here's your fucking
exactly, and they
universal
would have
health
to
care and
spend their
tuition.
money, and it would get
Yes.
reinvested, and it's like socialized medicine. Socialized medicine tends to suck, right? Like in Canada and the United Kingdom, but it
Yeah.
provides a baseline of fucking care. And
Yeah.
what we should have is a blended option where everyone has a baseline of care. But if you want to pay more money, you can get
Sure.
insurance, or you want to pay out of
Sure.
pocket, you can get this fucking high level
Yeah, as long
American
as the
care.
people who can't help themselves at all can get help, and then for the people that want
Right.
sort of a
But nobody's
hybrid
doing
option.
that.
Yeah,
Nobody's
yeah,
fucking,
yeah.
especially for the lower middle class. If you are not below the poverty line, you get sick. You're just fucked. It's just like if you're not poor enough, if you get charged with a crime that you're not guilty of, if you're not poor enough to get that free lawyer, you're just fucked nine
Yeah,
times out of
that's
ten.
yeah, kind of
And
like
it's
I think how this that's how I sort of started this section of it was by
yeah,
asking like how if you can afford to break the law, you can, and if you
right.
can't, you're just
Well, that's not everything. I mean, with the proliferation of cameras, you lying
yes,
and get away with
yeah,
shit is more often. I mean,
yeah,
Robert Durst is going to go rot in prison. R.
yeah,
Kelly's
yeah,
going to die in prison.
yeah. Finally,
Bill
yeah,
Cosby should have died in prison,
yeah.
but it's. I mean, so there is still some bit, but for the most part, we are. I think we are entering in this new paradigm where wealth is mattering less, but still, if you have a really really good lawyer, you're going to have to get away with more shit than if you
So like,
don't.
what's the for someone who is very you are you're you love what the country is founded under and what opportunities anyone who comes here or is born here can potentially have. But when you paint like sort of a bleak picture of like how it's
Yeah,
the way
I
things are
mean,
set up,
I
like
don't want to. I don't want to be overly bleak. America is still the one place. I've traveled in Europe and in Asia a lot.
but the government I'm
There's
saying
not
is
a
like
lot of hope there, right?
I
Like,
don't I know but what I don't want to do is talk about what goes on in the rest of the world. I want to just
no, I know, but
specifically
I'm gonna focus on one thing that still very much exists in America, and why people walk across Mexico to get into this country,
yeah
right? Why people kill themselves to get here, is that if you work fucking hard, you can raise your station in life. And there's a lot of people on the left that are trying to convince people, hey, you can't win. The system's job, so you can't win, especially if you're a person of color. But really, they're just saying that to facilitate them winning. Like when Ilhan Omar, an immigrant from another country who came here, she's fucking winning while telling people they can't fucking win, right? So that's kind of a grift. But you still in America, if you come here and you work hard and you innovate and I'm not going to get ahead working at fucking McDonald's. No, you're right, you're not. But you can go to McDonald's and work, and a lot of McDonald's have educational programs where they'll help pay for your school, and you go to school and you keep moving the ball forward. A lot of people just want to think they should win just by wallowing, right? And that's not.
yeah
And of course, there's luck. Like your industry, the comedy industry, you can be the funniest motherfucker in the world, right? Um, but you might not ever get that
sure
moment,
yeah
that zeitgeist, right? Other industries aren't like that. If you fucking become an engineer and you work hard, you're gonna make a nice fucking living. There are
yeah
plenty of broke lawyers because they're lazy, stupid fucking lawyers, right? You're gonna make a fucking nice living. And me,
yeah
like it's just like this recruiting business. Me, I like starting business. I like doing new things. I'm 49. It's like the radio and all that. I got into that when my youngest went to undergrad because I was just kind of lost because I had spent
yeah some free
18
time
or
all of a
18
sudden
years.
yeah
Well, I'd done my whole life. Being a father was the most important part of my life, right? And people want to, well, how did your kids turn out so well academically? And both my kids will tell you I'm a fucking asshole. Like they got an A minus. I was like, what the fuck do you get an A minus? Because my parents were very
yeah
laissez-faire. I was smoking weed and fucking when I was 11 years old. That's
hmm
no way to fucking be, right? And I felt like I wasted a lot of potential. And it wasn't until my daughter was born that I really got motivated about shit. But if people want to know how kids are successful, it's because their parents were engaged and they didn't take their bullshit and they made them fucking achieve shit. And they supported their dreams at the
but
same
in a
time.
world like if we live in a country where it's increasingly more run by people who don't ultimately care and just want to get rich and don't care about things like
You're
healthcare and
still free, though. You're still free to pursue your own shit,
sure
man.
yeah
I
but
mean,
what
but it's some.
isn't it shouldn't it be in our interest as civilians and then in the interest of our government to kind of do more than just say well you're free
Oh
so good
yeah,
luck.
it should be, but they don't give a
So
fuck.
what
And
do we? I mean,
there's.
what are practically though, as people,
I don't
what
know.
do
Like,
we?
I'm not ever running for shit. I did 15 years of public service, right? I
Yeah,
fucking had my fill.
and
None
you
of it
did.
was
I mean, look,
elected.
you did it in a way that was, fair, and you looked after people who didn't have
Oh,
the
I could have
option.
been. There were times when I was I mean, like, look, if I went to your house, right, and you had beat the shit out of your fucking wife at fucking 2 a.m.,
Yeah.
I would fucking tell you once, turn around, put your hand up. If your wife's in there a bloody mess, I'd tell you once, put your hands behind your
Well,
back.
yeah,
If you
yeah, yeah.
didn't, it was a fuck. I was not always sweet, right?
I'm not saying you're sweet.
But
I'm
I
saying
mean,
you were
I
not
mean, there were
like.
things, there were crimes that upset me, right? Like fucking shame on you, if but there were, I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, I think we are in a situation where you should try to do good as an individual, and maybe it creates this snowball of it. Like I lost a lot of business. So when we had the protests, right,
Yeah.
I I put it out there on social media.
I
Anyone
remember that.
arrested
Yeah.
wasn't committing any violence or theft or
That was
vandalism.
very kind of you to do.
I
Yeah.
represent all. I took on about 50 cases. About 40 of them got dismissed very quickly, and then
Yeah.
a couple I had to take all the way to the custody trial, but I ended up getting them all dismissed. Right, and I'll do stuff like that because I feel like. But then I've also represented police officers for free when I felt like they were getting the fun,
Sure.
and I just try to do shit right. Like I try to, and sometimes it pays dividends. It's like this recruiting business. My business partner has been to prison, right? He needs me because I'm, the guy, but he's the genius behind it. But he needed someone to believe in him and to sign the forms and set up the company. But it's largely him doing the work, and I'm going to make 600-700 grand off him this year. To me personally, in my fucking
Yes.
pocket,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes karmically, if you do good shit and you help people, that it'll come back. But also, you're going to get taken advantage of a lot, right? Because we got a bunch of shitty people. So, I mean, I think really you have to educate yourself. You have to figure out what you want to do, what your personal genius is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And try to be as successful as you can and make sure to protect your loved ones and do that. Do I think we're going to fix America? No. I mean, I think we are in the descent of the empire, but I really don't think it was ever that great. Like, I mean, if you look, I mean, I think we're greater than everyone else, right?
Yes.
But slavery, Jim Crow, polarization of wealth, classism. I mean, and people want to talk like fucking India. Their rape culture, they still have the caste system, even
I
though
know.
they've outlawed it. It's fucking horrible, right? You look
I
at fucking.
I feel like the only hope for the country is and it's as next to impossible as any other sort of plan, but like the willingness to, especially now, especially in the last like 5, 6, 7 years, the willingness to be more humble about the things you think you know and learn. I feel like the overwhelming majority of the
Humility is overrated, man. Come on.
what is.
Come on, just
Well, I know,
humble this.
yeah,
Fuck that.
humility
Fuck,
is.
man. You're a swinging dick, man. I don't
That's
know
a
about this
very
floppy hair, right?
that's
Like
a
I miss hipster Nick with the little round glasses and the nice coif and the like white leather jackets
I
and
still
shit. I
have
don't
that
know.
jacket.
I don't know. I don't know. You're wearing a Western shirt. You look like you stole one of my shirts, right?
This is what
I
I
don't
wear
know
when I
what's
go to
going.
Texas.
I don't
I
know what
gotta
the fuck's
fit
going
in.
on with this Nick, right? This is the Nick standing outside with a fist raised at a Tool concert. I don't fucking know this guy, but the Nick I know is not humble Nick. It's not humility. I would say instead, what we need is more
Well, I'm
Americans that are
I'm not
really.
humble about a lot. I'm very arrogant about a lot of things, but there are the
I don't
things
think
that I
you're
feel.
arrogant. I think you're good at shit, right?
Yeah,
And
and
we need more Americans trying to be good at shit.
when I am good at things and
Yeah.
I've put in enough time, then I'll be a little bit more arrogant and I'll be like, I don't need to be humble. But that's when
Right.
I'm like, it's something I'm like steeped in experience. But when it comes to things that you fucking have barely scratched the surface on, I think that, just take a minute, breathe. Don't put something on social media just because you feel it in the moment, and then read something. Like, really learn and be uncomfortable for a while. And I feel like, and I'm only saying this because I have done this personally with a lot of things that I've sat and gone, I think I know this. And then I go, but I probably don't. And I'll sit and learn and be quiet for a while and take in information. And then I come out on the other side a little more humble and a little bit more appreciative of like what the other side is thinking and experiencing. And then guess what? I'm a lot less hateful about stuff. I'm a lot less, short tempered
Have
about
you
things
ever been
someone doesn't
hateful?
understand.
Like,
What's that?
have you ever been hateful? You've never struck me as a hateful
Yeah,
person.
like
Like, have you had a
hateful.
hateful?
Well, It's
You had a
it's
hateful period.
it's
Like, were you angry
ironic hate.
once?
It's ironic hate because I'm hateful of people who are intolerant. Where I'll
I
be
don't,
like,
I don't know. I think I got smug Nick before, but I don't know if I mean, did you ever go through a hateful phase of life,
you
like
should have
as a
seen
16-year-old?
my first 5, 6 years of stand up. It was pure anger and just, I mean, it was uncomfortable. I would, it would still be funny, but like I would,
Right.
a lot of times where the funny would stop because I would get mad, and I was just filled with fucking rage just from being young and dumb and not knowing better. And I had to work through that in my personal life and on stage. And I came out of it a more reasonable
Yeah.
person who can
You always struck me as an incredibly reasonable person.
now, because you didn't know me 15 years
Yeah.
ago. If you
No,
knew me then and you know me now, you'd be like, it's a completely different human being. I'd like to think. I still have
I
many
mean, on the flip side,
flaws.
one of the things that I've always felt from you, right, that has allowed you to, and I think this is a very important point, that has allowed you to chase dreams is that I felt like you've always had a lot of love and support from your parents, right? And I
Yeah.
could be wrong. That's just been my perception.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing as me as a father, and I'm not saying my parents didn't love me or support me how they could, right? But it, my son's apartment in downtown Austin is somewhere I'd like to live, right? As a
Funny.
49-year-old man, right? It's
Yeah.
fucking stupid. It's in a fucking hotel. I call him Eloise, the little kid that lived in the hotel. But I mean, I think that if you really like, if people are really wanting to make America better, I think one of the things is we need not just people like to say fathers, but it's fathers and mothers, right?
Yeah.
We need parents more involved in their kids in two ways. It's one, not just all carrot, because for me, there's a lot of carrot and stick. I mean, you've seen that I get fucking fussy with my kids and I expect them to achieve stuff. But it's, if we want America to be better, and because we have so many people in my generation that just like to demonize kids, right? And this is my kids' generation is probably the smartest generation ever, right? And the generation after them will be even smarter and smarter and smarter. I think we all just need to, as people, support the next generation, whether it's your kids or your
Yeah.
nephews or just people that you feel like younger people that you, because family isn't blood or family isn't, I know it sounds trite and fucking saccharine and Hallmark, but family is really the people that you have this relationship with
Yeah.
that
I agree.
is, you know, and I think really that's the way we make America better is fucking, I don't think we do have much shot. I think social media and Zuckerberg has ruined it all. And I think we're all going to hell in a handbasket.
Right.
And we,
Yeah, I mean, they did a version of what you did for your family. They
yeah,
worked hard, so they except they did it. They moved to another country to
you know,
get out
your
of
parents
war.
are like, what a tremendous American success story, right? Though
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
came as refugees from a war-torn country
Yes.
and opened up a successful business and were able to provide better lives for both their
Yeah, I
children,
mean, we went to
right?
like American public schools and didn't have to worry
Yeah.
about bombs fucking landing in our neighborhood. It was like, yeah, that if
You got to fuck Tawny Katane, right? Like I'm sure your
you
dad
son of a
like
bitch.
leans back every once in a while. I don't care how successful your brother gets, right? I don't care if he runs the business or whatever. Every once in a while,
Yeah.
your dad, I promise you, leans back, thinks about that White Snake video. It says you probably don't even know. Like your brother probably told him at some point when your mother wasn't around. Fucking Nick, fucking Tawny Katane. And he gets to lean back and think, I raised a son that fucking threw the pipe on Tawny
Doesn't
Katane
even know what that
and
band is.
just swells with pride in his
Would have
chest. I
no idea
promise you.
what that band is. He
Yeah,
would have
see,
no idea what it
yeah, I
was.
don't think you give your dad enough fucking credit. I think your
Trust
dad
me,
knows everything.
he moved here as a full-on adult from another country and had no time for pop culture. He was just working and fucking breaking his
I
back.
think your parents probably are so proud
They're proud
of
now, but
this shit.
they did not support me in any way for the first 6 7 years of that. They thought it was a fucking joke. Why would we move to this country for you to throw
When you
away
said
your
they didn't
life?
support you in any way, they didn't like feed you and shit.
No, I lived at home for the
Okay, so
first.
they economically supported you. They were just not emotionally supportive because I wouldn't have been either, right? Like my kids, if they said, "Well, I just want to be a cop," well,
They
that's fine. When you get done with fucking whatever professional school you're going to
right.
graduate from, go fucking pursue that dream. But until then,
They were
you're
very
gonna
much
fucking
like,
go.
we don't want to hear about it. If that's what you want to do, then that's you're doing that on your own. Good luck. And they
Yeah,
were.
but it sounds like they still provided you with support, right? Just not encouragement. I think there's a vast difference between support and encouragement, right? I mean, because you would have most certainly had to give up this dream at some point had they not been there for you, right? You know, don't you think?
I mean,
Oh, come on.
I don't I don't think so, because I was
Really?
for the first like 4 or 5 years I lived at home, and they didn't mind that, but like, I had to like, I still had to work. Do I had to
Well,
still do things. I
think
didn't
about
just
how many comics you know they gave it up, right?
Sure, yeah. But that's
Some of them give
large.
up because they suck, but there are some people that gave it up because they couldn't live at home and they had to go get a job and do shit. I don't know. I think the Youssef is. I think they rock, and
Yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
it's led to a firmament that allowed you to achieve the.
yeah, I mean,
Because
look, there certainly, they could have just been like, kick you out on the street and be like,
right, right,
and that has certainly happened to people. So obviously, it's not like a one or the other issue, but they
uh,
certainly were like, emotional and support and that
right.
kind of stuff goes a long way when you're
Emotional
doing.
support is very, very
Yeah, yeah,
important.
it's huge when you're. I was a kid. I was a teenager when I started this shit. So it's like, you're out there on your own. You're alone when you're doing this sort of thing. When you're doing stand up. So it's like, emotional support goes a long way. Same with any other support. So for sure, very fortunate to spend those first the hardest years, like living at home and just like largely like ignoring, like leaving when they're coming home and just sort of like, oh, I don't want to, because every other week it would be a conversation like, why are you still doing this? Like, why aren't you, and I was like barely attending college, and it was just like, it was bad.
Yeah, I would
Um,
have kicked the shit out of you if you were my kid.
sure, I am sure. Yeah, it would have.
I'd have been like, go fucking spend every night at the store, but you fucking get your ass to fucking class, or I'm gonna fucking beat the shit out of you.
Yeah, and yeah,
No.
and I did
The
until I
boy,
just,
not the girl. You know,
and I
I just
just
screwed.
didn't. But anyway,
It,
look,
it worked out for them.
it did, yeah, and they're happy now, and it just took me finally working and then showing them the fruits of my labor. Like, look, I'm performing at this theater with some other comedians that it was their crowd, but they still were like, oh, and
I'm
then they saw me on
sure they're
TV
very
a few
proud.
times, and they were like, oh, I see, and they just sort of, but it was like one of those. It was a long
But
fought
now
battle.
you're doing a podcast with some obnoxious fucking old asshole. So it's
Yeah.
like it's going the wrong way, man. You gotta fucking turn this shit around.
um,
You gotta get back on your fucking,
so listen,
global tours.
I I want to ask you, because we're literally at the 2 hour mark. We
Yeah, my
didn't.
wife's texting me
I know
saying, "When are we doing?"
we didn't get to some of the stuff I wanted to talk about, but if you want to do this again, I
Oh
would
yeah.
love to have you
Well,
on,
you
because
should wait to see what the response is because it could be like, "Who
it'll
the
be fun.
fuck is this fucking asshole?"
It'll be
No,
fun. Well,
I
also,
like doing stuff with you.
this
I like talking to you. It hasn't been just trying to get into the store for free, you know.
that's funny, yeah.
Yeah,
Because this goes out as an audio podcast too, so people will
yeah.
hear it going forward, starting tonight. Um, but it's nice to be able to talk to someone who's like reasonable minded, and it doesn't just get into like prepackaged responses and just taking one side. It's You just get to cover ground in a new and interesting way. And I think, like, obviously I'm not going to keep you on for fucking hours on end, but if I go, hey, this is an interesting topic, you want to come on for
Yeah.
20, 30
No,
minutes, talk
I'd
about
love,
it.
if I can make it work, I'd love to
Of
do
course,
it.
yeah.
I will be, I will strive for inauthenticity next time.
Yes.
You can only get so much real me, because
Yeah.
those
Yeah, put on a
outfits.
character and then
No,
just, take
no,
some
I
crazy.
love doing stuff with you, Nick. I mean, you know, you're one of my favorite
Yeah,
people,
same, man.
but
You're
only because of Tawny Katane, and I'll
Of
keep
course,
beating
yeah,
that
of
dead
course.
horse.
Ever
But,
since you found out about that, that's the only
I
thing.
mean, it's just,
But look, I thank you. You're a good
no,
man.
thank you.
You've always been a good man. Uh, you raised a good family. You're, like, I
Is
always
my
have
name? Did you cover the tattoo of my name though?
no, it's still there, and I kept it there because I'm like, look, Charles is a real friend of mine, and it's a funny story that I could tell people. They
Yeah.
go, why do you have the name Charles on your arm? And it's like, you're a good guy. You're a good friend. I'm gonna keep it forever. Why not?
Well, I told it that we had we had a sexual experience together.
Yeah,
and-
yeah. I've told people that part of the story. Remember, we tricked those people at
Yeah.
the tattoo shop, and we're like, we're jilted lovers, and this is my way of saying sorry. We just came up with a new story every 5 minutes.
At the fucking like 4 a.m. fucking Manhattan tattoo shop.
It was great. I'll tell on the next podcast or the one after.
Okay.
I will tell the full version of this story, and
Very
I'll
good.
show the tattoo so people will know what the hell I'm talking about. But it's a good story. It's fun.
Yeah. And
But
please
anyway,
send me the link, and I'll post
yeah,
the
yeah,
links to the people.
absolutely. Thank you
All
again,
right.
dude. And say hi to Kat for me, and I
I will.
will talk to you and tell her I'm sorry for keeping you here so long.
Oh, I will tell her it's all your fault.
Yes,
and
please do.
blame
I
you.
will happily take the blame.
All
And
right,
I'll see you soon.
Hey, yes, sir.
All
Bye
right,
bye.
bye. There he is, man. Um, so that was Charles Adams, everybody. Big Angry Law on the social media. That went a good 2 hours. I was planning on about 45 minutes, maybe an hour. But he's great like that. He loves to talk. He knows a lot of shit, about a lot of shit. So we'll have him back, and we'll get into some other stuff. I know I was going to talk about that Texas abortion law. We didn't get to it, but we'll bring that around next time, and we'll kind of dive into that. So. Um, Let me know what you think via the according channels. Whether it's, if you're on my Patreon, you can get on the Discord and we can talk there, or leave comments, or send an email to the podcast email. Um, that being said, see you tomorrow.
It's the end of the show. Like, subscribe, and comment. Don't be a dick.